I watched through the security cameras as my entire family approached the massive iron gates of my Malibu beach estate, their faces glowing with anticipation for their exclusive reunion. They had no idea the property belonged to me, the same daughter they'd ghosted for 10 years after believing my stepmother's lies about stolen inheritance money. The concierge's voice crackled through the intercom. "May I ask who you're here to see?" Their confident smiles faltered. This time, I was the one in control. The memory of that horrible October evening still burned in my chest, even after a decade had passed. I was 22 years old, fresh out of college, with a business degree when my mother succumbed to pancreatic cancer. We had spent our final months together sharing stories and creating memories while her body grew weaker. She passed peacefully with my hand in hers, whispering that she trusted me to take care of everything. 3 weeks after we buried her, my father, Thomas, called a family meeting at our childhood home in Pasadena. I arrived to find my stepmother, Patricia, already seated at the dining room table, surrounded by manila folders and bank statements. My siblings, Marcus and Jennifer, sat across from her with confusion written on their faces. The autumn air felt thick with tension as I took my seat. "We need to discuss some serious discrepancies." Patricia began, her voice dripping with false concern. She slid a stack of papers across the polished oak table. $50,000 is missing from your mother's estate account. The withdrawals coincide perfectly with your visits home during her illness. My hands trembled as I examined the documents. The withdrawals were real, but I had never touched that money. Each transaction showed dates when I had indeed been home caring for my mother during her chemotherapy treatments. The precision of the timing made my stomach turn. "This has to be some mistake," I said, looking to my father for support. His gray eyes, once warm and protective, now held doubt and disappointment. "Dad, you know I would never steal from Mom. She set up my college fund separately. I didn't need this money." Patricia leaned forward, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the table. "Then explain these withdrawals, Deborah. The bank confirmed they were made using the estate's access codes. Only family members had those codes." Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair while Jennifer bit her lip, avoiding eye contact. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. I realized with growing horror that they were actually considering this accusation might be true. "I want to see the actual bank security footage," I demanded. "These papers don't prove anything except that someone made withdrawals. Where did the money actually go?" Patricia's eyes narrowed slightly, a tell I would only recognize in hindsight. "The bank only keeps footage for 30 days. It's been nearly 2 months since the last withdrawal. How convenient that you're asking now." That night, I couldn't sleep. Something felt terribly wrong about the entire situation. I spent hours going through my mother's old emails on her laptop, which I had helped her set up during her treatment. Hidden in a folder labeled garden photos was something that made my blood run cold. Email exchanges between Patricia and someone at the bank dated 2 years prior, discussing estate planning services. The next morning, I rushed to show my father what I had found, but when I arrived at the house, Patricia met me at the door with a triumphant smile. "Your father and I reviewed the security system footage from his home office," she announced. "We found video of you accessing the safe where the estate checkbook was kept." My heart sank as she produced a grainy video on her tablet. It showed a figure that could have been me entering the office late at night. The timestamp matched one of my visits home, but I knew with absolute certainty that I had never entered that office after 9 in the evening, always respecting my father's workspace boundaries. "This is edited," I said desperately. "Look at the shadows. They're inconsistent with the timestamp. Someone doctored this footage." My father emerged from behind Patricia, his face etched with pain and resolve. "Enough, Deborah. The evidence is overwhelming. Your mother's death clearly affected you more than we realized. Perhaps you felt entitled to early inheritance, or maybe you have debts we don't know about." "Thomas, don't be too harsh," Patricia said, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "Grief makes people do terrible things. Maybe if Deborah gets help, admits what she's done, we can work through this as a family." The trap was perfectly set. If I continued to deny the accusations, I would be seen as a remorseless thief. If I admitted to something I didn't do, I would validate their suspicions. Either way, Patricia had won this round. "I need some air," I managed to say, backing toward the door. As I left, I heard Jennifer finally speak up, her voice small and uncertain. "Maybe we should investigate more before jumping to conclusions." Patricia's response was swift and cutting. "Oh, Jennifer, dear, I know it's hard to accept that your sister could do this, but numbers don't lie. Neither does video evidence. Sometimes the people we love most are capable of betraying us in the worst ways." That evening, I discovered something that changed everything. Hidden in my mother's jewelry box, which she had given me before her death, was a tiny camera disguised as a button. She had sewn it into a blazer months ago, paranoid about Patricia's increasing control over household finances. The memory card inside contained footage of Patricia accessing the office safe multiple times, removing cash and carefully photographing documents. My hands shook with excitement and vindication as I prepared to show this evidence to my family. But when I called my father to arrange another meeting, his phone went straight to voicemail. Marcus didn't answer either. Jennifer picked up but sounded strange and distant. "Deborah, I think it's best if you don't come by for a while," she said quietly. "Patricia showed us your college disciplinary record, the academic warning for that accounting error in your junior year. She thinks it shows a pattern of financial dishonesty." "That was a simple mistake on a class project," I protested. The professor cleared it up immediately. "Jennifer, I have proof that Patricia is behind this. I have video evidence." There was a long pause before my sister responded. "Patricia said you might claim to have evidence. She warned us you might try to fabricate something to shift blame. She showed us your therapy records from after Mom's diagnosis, the ones where you expressed anger about her remarrying Dad so quickly." My mind reeled. Those therapy sessions were supposed to be confidential. How had Patricia accessed them? More importantly, how had she twisted my legitimate grief and concern into evidence of criminal intent? "Please," I begged, "just look at what I found. Give me 5 minutes to show you." "I'm sorry," Jennifer whispered. "Dad has forbidden any of us from meeting with you until you admit what you've done and return the money. He says it's tough love. Patricia thinks you might have a gambling problem or drugs. She found some pharmacy receipts in your old room for pain medication." Those were Mom's prescriptions. I was picking them up for her. The frustration boiled over into tears. "How can you all be so blind?" The line went dead. When I tried to call back, I discovered my number had been blocked. One by one, I tried reaching other family members, only to find the same result. Patricia had been thorough in her campaign. I sat in my small apartment staring at the button camera that contained proof of my innocence. Without anyone willing to look at it, it might as well have been a paperweight. The family I had loved and trusted had been turned against me with surgical precision. Patricia had studied us all, learned our weaknesses, and exploited them perfectly. That night I made a decision that would define the next decade of my life. If my family chose to believe lies over truth, if they valued Patricia's manipulations over my lifetime of love and loyalty, then I would disappear from their lives. But I would not go quietly into poverty and shame. I would build something extraordinary from the ashes of their betrayal. The last thing I did before beginning my exile was mail the button camera to my father's office with a note. "When you're ready to see the truth, watch this. Until then, I hope Patricia's money keeps you warm at night. Your daughter, Deborah." I learned later that Patricia intercepted the package claiming I had sent threatening materials to the family. The camera was never seen again, and my last attempt at vindication became further evidence of my supposed harassment, the perfect crime executed by a woman who had married my father just 18 months after meeting him at a charity gala. The weeks following my exile blurred into a painful haze of unanswered calls and returned letters. I moved from my comfortable apartment to a studio in Van Nuys, selling my car to make rent and survive on instant noodles while I figured out my next move. What I didn't realize was that Patricia's campaign against me had only just begun. My first indication that something deeper was happening came when I tried to send a birthday card to my 8-year-old cousin Lucy. The cheerful purple envelope came back stamped, "Return to sender, no such address." Confused, I verified the address against my phone contacts. It was correct. When I called my Aunt Helen to check her number, was disconnected. Desperate for any family connection, I tried reaching out through social media. My Facebook messages went unread, showing that peculiar seen notification, without any response. My emails bounced back with delivery failures. Even the family group chat where we'd shared recipes and vacation photos for years suddenly showed me as removed. It wasn't until I ran into Sarah Chen, my best friend from high school who worked at the Postal Service, that pieces of the puzzle started forming. She found me crying outside a coffee shop after another failed attempt to contact Marcus through his workplace. "Deborah, oh my God, what's wrong?" Sarah sat beside me, her postal uniform still crisp from her shift. "I haven't seen you since... Wait, didn't you move to Seattle?" Seattle? I wiped my eyes, confused. "I never moved to Seattle. I've been right here in LA. Sarah's expression shifted to something between confusion and alarm. "But your change of address form. I processed it myself 3 months ago. You filed to forward everything to some address in Washington." My blood chilled. "Sarah, I never filed any change of address. I've been in the same apartment until last month." What followed was an off-the-books investigation that revealed the terrifying scope of Patricia's scheme. Sarah discovered not 1 but 7 change-of-address forms, filed in my name over the past months, each redirecting my mail to different, non-existent addresses. The handwriting was close enough to mine to pass casual inspection, and the forms included personal details only family would know. "This is mail fraud," Sarah whispered, showing me the copies she'd made. "Whoever did this could face federal charges. But Deborah, they'd need your ID, your social security number, your previous addresses." Patricia had all of that information. As my father's wife, she had access to family files, tax documents, and every piece of personal data stored in the house. She'd been systematically erasing my ability to communicate while maintaining plausible deniability. The electronic isolation was equally methodical. My old college roommate, Emma Martinez, worked in IT and helped me investigate the digital blockade. She discovered that someone had been accessing my email account through password recovery, marking family emails as spam and creating filter rules that automatically deleted incoming messages. "They used your mother's maiden name and your first pet's name for security questions," Emma explained, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Classic family member hack. They've been in your account for months, Deborah. Look at this filter list. Any email containing words like family, reunion, birthday, or sorry gets automatically trashed." The violation felt like ice in my veins. Patricia hadn't just turned my family against me, she'd made sure I couldn't even attempt reconciliation. Every apology I might have received, every invitation to reconsider every birthday wish from a sympathetic cousin, all deleted before I could see them. "Can you trace the IP addresses?" I asked desperately. Emma nodded grimly. "They're all coming from Pasadena. Some from your father's house, others from various coffee shops in the area. Whoever did this was smart enough to vary their locations, but not smart enough to use a VPN. Meanwhile, Patricia's poison spread through the family grapevine like wildfire. My cousin Robert, who I randomly encountered at a grocery store, nearly dropped his shopping basket when he saw me. "Deborah, but aren't you in rehab?" He stepped back as if I might be contagious. "Rehab, Robert, what are you talking about?" His eyes darted nervously. "Patricia told everyone at Easter dinner. She said you'd stolen money to feed your opioid addiction. That's why you attacked her when she confronted you, and why you've been sending threatening letters from various treatment centers." Attacked her threatening letters. My voice rose with incredulity. "I haven't sent any letters, and I certainly never touched Patricia." Robert looked increasingly uncomfortable. "She had a bruise on her arm. Said you grabbed her when she tried to stop you from taking more money. And the letters, they were pretty nasty, Deborah. talking about revenge and making her pay. Aunt Helen was so upset she had to leave the room. The fabrication was breathtaking in its detail. Patricia had created an entire alternate narrative of my life, complete with physical evidence and forged correspondence. Every family member was receiving a carefully crafted version of my supposed downfall, each detail building on the last, to create an ironclad story of addiction and violence. I learned from Robert that family gatherings now included prayers for my recovery and discussions about enabling versus tough love. Patricia positioned herself as the brave stepmother who'd exposed my problems despite the personal cost, while my father was portrayed as a heartbroken parent doing his best to protect the family from his troubled daughter. "She cries every time your name comes up," Robert added quietly. "Says she blames herself for not seeing the signs sooner. The whole family thinks she's a saint for trying to help you despite everything." The irony burned like acid. Patricia shed tears for the camera while systematically destroying my existence. I wanted to scream the truth to shake Robert until he saw through the lies, but his body language made it clear he was already planning his escape from this uncomfortable encounter. After he hurried away, I sat in my car processing this new information. Patricia had created a hermetically sealed bubble of deception around my family. Even if I managed to reach someone, they'd been so thoroughly programmed to expect manipulation from me that any truth I shared would be seen as further evidence of my supposed pathology. The masterstroke came when I discovered she'd been filing complaints with local police about harassment, creating an official paper trail of my alleged instability. Officer Janet Williams, who took my statement when I tried to report the mail fraud, pulled up the records with a frown. "Miss Thompson, I see here we've had 6 complaints filed by a Patricia Thompson regarding threatening communications and stalking behavior. Are you related?" "She's my stepmother," I said through gritted teeth. "And those complaints are fabricated. I haven't contacted her or anyone in my family for months because she's blocking all my communications." The officer's expression remained neutral, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. Desperate daughter, with a history of alleged theft versus established stepmother with documented harassment. Without concrete evidence of Patricia's schemes, I looked like exactly what she'd painted me as, an unstable young woman lashing out at family members who'd rightfully cut her off. I left the police station with the bitter understanding that Patricia had thought of everything. Legal channels were closed to me. Family connections were severed. Even casual acquaintances had been poisoned against me. She'd created a narrative so compelling that any attempt to dispute it only reinforced the image of me as delusional and dangerous. That night, Emma held me as I sobbed in her tiny apartment, my body shaking with the magnitude of loss. My family hadn't just abandoned me. They'd been stolen from me by a woman who understood that the most effective lies are wrapped in enough truth to be believed. "What are you going to do?" Emma asked softly, stroking my hair. I sat up, wiping my eyes with sudden clarity. "I'm going to disappear completely. Let Patricia have her victory. Let my family believe whatever horror story she's selling. But Emma, I swear to you, someday, somehow, I'm going to build something so undeniable that the truth won't matter anymore. I'll become successful beyond their wildest dreams. And then I'll let them see exactly what they threw away." Emma squeezed my hand. "I believe you. But Deborah, don't let revenge consume you. Success is the best revenge only if you're actually successful for yourself, not just to prove something to them." Her words would echo in my mind for years to come. As I prepared to truly vanish from my family's world, I made a promise to myself I would build something extraordinary, not just for revenge, but for the life I deserved. Patricia had stolen my past, but she couldn't touch my future. The final insult came when I learned through Sarah that even sympathy cards for my mother's 1-year memorial had been returned to senders with addressee unknown stamps. Patricia had erased me so thoroughly that family members assumed I'd died or disappeared completely. At the memorial service I wasn't invited to, they apparently lit a candle for their lost daughter and sister, mourning me as if I were dead while I lived just 30 miles away. Patricia had won this battle so completely that my family didn't even question my absence anymore. I had become a cautionary tale, a ghost story told at gatherings, a reminder of how addiction and greed could destroy even the closest bonds. The systematic isolation was complete, leaving me with nothing but determination and a burning need to prove that the real story was far different from the fiction they'd been fed. Rock bottom has a peculiar clarity to it. Sitting on the floor of my empty studio apartment eating my last package of ramen at 2 a.m, I stared at my laptop screen with the kind of focus that only comes from desperation. My bank account showed $47. Rent was due in 3 days. The only furniture I hadn't sold was the folding table that held my computer and the sleeping bag Emma had given me. But on that screen was the beginning of something that would change everything. Lines of code that represented months of obsessive work. While my family believed I was spiraling into addiction and crime, I had been teaching myself advanced programming through free online courses and bootleg textbooks. Every rejection, every returned letter, every moment of isolation had been fuel for 18-hour coding sessions. The idea came from my own financial desperation. Traditional investment platforms required minimum deposits I couldn't dream of affording. Financial advisors charged fees that only made sense for wealthy clients. There was an entire population of people like me, intelligent, motivated, but locked out of wealth-building tools by artificial barriers. What if artificial intelligence could democratize investing? I muttered to myself, typing furiously. What if someone with $50 could access the same analytical power as someone with 50 million? My algorithm started simple a machine learning model that analyzed market patterns and suggested micro-investments. But as I refined it, feeding it data and teaching it to recognize increasingly complex patterns, something remarkable emerged. The AI wasn't just matching professional advisors, it was outperforming them by identifying correlations human analysts missed. Emma found me passed out at my laptop one morning, surrounded by empty coffee cups and scribbled equations. She'd used her spare key after I missed our weekly check-in call. "Deborah, you're killing yourself," she said, shaking me awake. "When's the last time you ate real food or saw sunlight?" "Emma, look at this," I said, ignoring her concerns and pulling up my test results. "I gave the AI $50 of virtual money 6 months ago. Look what it's worth now." Her eyes widened at the screen. $3,000, that can't be right. "It's all documented. Every trade, every decision, every calculation. The AI identified micro-trends in emerging markets that traditional algorithms ignore, because the profit margins are too small for major firms to bother with. But when you aggregate thousands of these micro-opportunities..." Emma sat down hard, processing the implications. "Deborah, if this is real..." "It is real, but I need capital to scale it. Real money to prove it works outside simulations. And I need a partner who understands business development, because I can barely afford cup noodles, let alone lawyers and patents." What happened next still feels like divine intervention. Emma had been saving for a house, squirreling away money from her IT job for 3 years. She had exactly $5,000 in her savings account, her entire nest egg, her security blanket, her future. "I'll give you the money," she said quietly, "all of it." "Emma, no, I can't ask you to risk everything on my crazy idea." She grabbed my shoulders, forcing me to meet her eyes. "I'm not doing this because you asked. I'm doing it because I've watched you work yourself to the bone for months, because you're brilliant, because your family's stupidity shouldn't doom you to poverty, and because..." She smiled slightly. "My grandmother always said the best investments are in people, not things." We spent the next week setting up the most basic corporate structure possible. LegalZoom for incorporation, a free checking account for the business, and handshake agreements because we couldn't afford proper contracts. Emma's $5,000 became our entire operating budget. $2,000 for essential software licenses, $1,000 for cloud computing services, $500 for regulatory filings, and the rest for keeping us alive while we worked. The first real test came when we deployed the AI with actual money. I invested $100 of our precious capital, my hands shaking as I initiated the first trades. Emma and I watched the screen like hawks barely breathing as the algorithm made its decisions. 24 hours later, we had $137. A week later, $212. By the end of the month, that initial $100 had become $423. The returns were consistent, the risk management solid. Our AI wasn't gambling. It was identifying inefficiencies with mathematical precision. "We need a name," Emma said one evening as we celebrated breaking the $1,000 mark with dollar menu burgers. "Something that captures what we're doing." "Equilibrium," I said without hesitation, because we're balancing the scales, giving everyone equal access to financial intelligence. Working conditions were brutal. We operated out of my studio apartment, taking turns sleeping while the other monitored the system. I picked up night shifts at a 24-hour diner, coding between orders and during breaks. Emma kept her day job but spent every evening and weekend refining our business model and reaching out to potential beta testers. Our first break came from an unexpected source. While serving coffee at 3 a.m, I overheard two venture capitalists complaining about the lack of innovation in fintech. "Everything's just repackaging the same old ideas," one said, scrolling through his phone. "I'd kill for something genuinely disruptive." My hands trembled as I refilled their cups. "Excuse me, but what would you consider genuinely disruptive?" They looked at me with the particular disdain reserved for service workers who dare speak to customers beyond order taking, but something in my expression must have caught their attention. "AI that actually works," the second one said dismissively. "Not marketing buzzwords. Actual artificial intelligence that makes money for regular people, not just hedge funds." "I have that," I said simply. What followed was the most important elevator pitch of my life, delivered between coffee refills and order calls. I showed them live performance data on my phone, explained the algorithm's principles, and watched their dismissal transform into intrigue. "Send us a pitch deck," the first VC said, handing me a business card. "If your numbers are real, we'll take a meeting." Emma and I spent 72 hours straight creating that pitch deck. We had no design skills, no professional templates, just raw data and passionate explanation. But the numbers spoke louder than any fancy graphics could. The meeting was a disaster that became a triumph. We showed up at the gleaming downtown office in our best thrift store professional wear, carrying a laptop held together with duct tape. The reception area cost more to furnish than I'd made in my entire life. "You're the coffee shop girl," the lead partner said, barely hiding his amusement. "And this is your company." "This is Equilibrium," I replied, setting up our presentation with hands that refused to shake. "And we're about to show you the future of democratic investing." Halfway through the presentation, their smirks disappeared. By the end, they were leaning forward, asking rapid-fire questions about scalability, security, and regulatory compliance. Our answers weren't polished, but they were honest and backed by undeniable results. "Your algorithm is elegant," the technical partner admitted. "But you have no business infrastructure, no regulatory framework, no marketing strategy. You're two exhausted women with a clever idea and no resources to execute it." My heart sank. Emma reached for my hand under the table, squeezing it in silent support. "However," he continued, "that's exactly why we're interested. You've achieved these results with nothing. Imagine what you could do with proper backing." The offer came with conditions that made my stomach turn. They wanted 70% equity board control and the right to replace us if we didn't meet aggressive growth targets. It was predatory, designed to steal our innovation while leaving us with crumbs. "We need to think about it," Emma said diplomatically. In the elevator afterward, I nearly collapsed. 70%? They want to take everything. "Then we find another way," Emma said firmly. "Your algorithm is worth more than their insulting offer." That night, something strange happened. My phone rang with a blocked number. The voice on the other end was digitally altered but somehow familiar. "Don't take their offer," the voice said. "Your stepmother's brother is a silent partner in that firm. If you accept Patricia, we'll know everything." The line went dead before I could respond. Whether it was a guardian angel or someone with their own agenda, the warning saved us from a trap we couldn't have seen coming. We declined the offer the next day professionally but firmly. The partners were shocked. Nobody walked away from their money, but walking away led to something better. Word spread in the startup community that 2 women had turned down Apex Ventures. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know what we had that made us confident enough to reject established players. The breakthrough came at a hackathon Emma dragged me to. Sleep-deprived and running on pure determination, we entered equilibrium in the financial innovation category. 48 hours later, we stood on stage accepting the grand prize $50,000 and introductions to legitimate investors. But the real victory was what happened in the audience. A woman named Grace Winters, CEO of a boutique investment firm, approached us afterward. "I've been in finance for 30 years, she said. "I've never seen an algorithm this sophisticated from a team with no formal financial training. How did you do it?" "Necessity," I answered honestly. "When you're locked out of traditional systems, you have to build your own doors." Grace became our first real advocate, connecting us with investors who understood innovation over intimidation. She also introduced us to her daughter, Jessica Winters, a securities lawyer who helped us navigate regulatory requirements pro bono. "Why are you helping us?" I asked Grace one evening after a particularly grueling meeting. "Because 30 years ago, I was you," she replied. "Brilliant, desperate, and fighting a system designed to keep me out. Someone gave me a chance. Now I'm paying it forward." With Grace's guidance and Jessica's legal expertise, we raised our first legitimate round of funding, $2 million, at a fair valuation that left Emma and me with majority control. The same VCs who had tried to lowball us came back with better offers, but we politely declined. Patricia's brother's firm sent increasingly aggressive emails, but Jessica shut them down with surgical precision. The night our funding closed, Emma and I sat in the same studio apartment where it all began. The folding table still held my laptop, but now it also held incorporation documents, partnership agreements, and a check that would change our lives. "We did it," Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Deborah, we actually did it." I stared at the numbers on the check, thinking about my family gathered around Patricia's lies, while I built something extraordinary from nothing. They thought I was an addict, a thief, a failure. They had no idea I was about to revolutionize an entire industry. "No," I corrected softly. "We've just begun." 3 years. That's all it took to go from eating ramen on my studio floor to sitting in a boardroom overlooking Manhattan fielding acquisition offers from the biggest names in tech. Equilibrium had exploded beyond our wildest projections, growing from a 2-woman operation to a company with 300 employees and 40 million users worldwide. The algorithm I'd developed in desperation had evolved into something unprecedented. Our AI didn't just make smart investments. It learned from each user's financial behavior, risk tolerance, and life goals to create truly personalized wealth-building strategies. A single mother in Detroit could grow her grocery savings into a college fund. A retirement-age janitor in Memphis could finally build the nest egg traditional advisors ignored him for. We had democratized wealth creation in a way that terrified established players. Microsoft is at $2.1 billion. Emma announced, reading from her phone as we sat in our latest boardroom. The walls were glass, the furniture imported, but I still kept that original folding table in the corner as a reminder. Apple just countered at 2.2. Our CFO, David Sterling, shook his head in amazement. 6 months ago, they laughed us out of rooms. Now they're in a bidding war. I stared at the numbers, feeling strangely detached. Billions. The girl who'd been accused of stealing $50,000 was now weighing billion-dollar offers. The irony wasn't lost on me. Patricia's lies had driven me to create more wealth than my family had seen in generations. There's something else. Our general counsel, Marcus Webb, no relation to my brother, said carefully, "We've had an inquiry from Meridian Capital. They're prepared to offer $2.5 billion." The room went silent. Meridian Capital was known for aggressive acquisitions and even more aggressive dismantling of companies they bought. But that wasn't what made my blood run cold. "Who runs Meridian's tech acquisition division?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Raymond Chen." Marcus replied, then paused. "He's apparently related to your board advisor, Grace Winters, through marriage. Her nephew by marriage to Patricia's brother," I finished quietly. Emma's face went white. "Your stepmother's family is trying to buy your company." The room erupted in discussions about conflicts of interest and disclosure requirements, but I sat frozen processing the implications. Patricia's brother Raymond had built his fortune through tech acquisitions, always staying behind the scenes, while his wife managed the public face of their empire. Now he was trying to acquire the very company his sister had tried to prevent me from building. "We need full disclosure on all bidders," I said, cutting through the chatter. "I want to know every connection, every potential conflict. If Patricia's family is circling, there's a reason." What we uncovered over the next 48 hours was a web of connections that would have impressed even Patricia. Raymond Chen had fingers in 3 of the 5 companies bidding for Equilibrium. His investment firm had stakes in the others. Every road led back to the family that had exiled me. "They're trying to force a sale to one of their vehicles," David explained, spreading out the corporate structure diagrams. "If they control enough of the bidding entities, they can manipulate the price, maybe even force hostile terms." "Over my dead body," Emma said fiercely. "We didn't build this for them to steal it." But Grace Winters surprised us all. She appeared in my office unannounced, her usually perfect composure cracked. "I had no idea Raymond was involved," she said without preamble. "I've spent 5 years carefully avoiding any business that touched your stepmother's family. When I found out this morning—" She paused, visibly upset. "I'm prepared to resign from the board immediately to avoid any appearance of impropriety." I studied her carefully. Grace had been our champion, our guide through treacherous waters. "Did you know who I was when we first met?" She shook her head firmly. "I knew you as a brilliant engineer with a revolutionary algorithm. It wasn't until months later that I made the connection. By then—" She smiled sadly. "By then, I'd seen enough to know that whatever story Patricia told about you was a lie." "Stay," I decided. "But help us navigate this. You know Raymond's playbook better than anyone." What followed was 3 months of corporate warfare that made our early struggles look like child's play. Raymond's entities pushed aggressive terms, tried to poach key employees, and even attempted to challenge our patents. But for every move he made, Grace helped us counter with deeper strategy. The stress was overwhelming. I developed chronic insomnia, surviving on micro-naps between negotiations. Emma handled the emotional toll by throwing herself into protecting our employees, ensuring that any acquisition would guarantee their jobs and equity. We'd built Equilibrium as a family, and we refused to let it be destroyed by the family that had destroyed me. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Yuki Tanaka, CEO of Tokyo-based Symbiotic Technologies, had been quietly observing the bidding war. While American companies focused on extracting value, Yuki saw something different in Equilibrium. "Your algorithm isn't just about money," she said during our first real conversation. "It's about empowerment. In Japan, we have a word, ikigai, your life's purpose. Your company gives people the tools to pursue their ikigai without financial fear." Her offer was elegant in its simplicity, $2.3 billion, but with unprecedented terms. Emma and I would retain 20% equity board seats and complete autonomy to run Equilibrium as a subsidiary. Our employees would receive generous retention packages. Most importantly, our mission to democratize financial intelligence would be protected by ironclad agreements. "Why," I asked directly, "why offer terms so favorable to us?" Yuki smiled. Because I investigated you, Deborah Thompson, not your company. You. I know about your family, your exile, your rise from nothing. A woman who builds such technology from such pain understands something fundamental about human nature. That understanding is worth more than any algorithm. The bidding war intensified as news of Symbiotic's offer leaked. Raymond's entities scrambled to match the terms, but their counteroffers felt hollow, focused on control rather than collaboration. Microsoft and Apple increased their bids, but couldn't match the structural guarantees Yuki offered. The night before our final decision, I couldn't sleep. I stood in my penthouse apartment, a far cry from that studio floor, staring out at the city lights. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Take Raymond's offer. It's time to come home. P. Patricia. After 3 years of silence, she was reaching out through her brother's acquisition attempt. The audacity was breathtaking. She'd stolen my family, tried to destroy my future, and now wanted to steal my company too. Emma found me there at dawn, having received her own message. Let me guess. Promises of family reconciliation if we play ball. Something like that. I showed her the text. She probably thinks we're still those desperate women in that tiny apartment. What she doesn't know, Emma said with a fierce smile, is that those desperate women were already billionaires. They just hadn't collected the check yet. The board meeting to decide Equilibrium's fate was scheduled for a Friday afternoon. Every major tech journalist was camped outside our building. The financial press had turned it into a David versus Goliath story, though they had no idea how personal the battle really was. As I prepared to enter the boardroom, Marcus Webb pulled me aside. There's something you should know. Raymond Chen is here. He's invoked an obscure shareholder provision to address the board directly. My stomach clenched, but I forced my expression to remain neutral. Let him speak. I want everything on record. Raymond Chen looked exactly like what he was, a corporate predator in a $10,000 suit. But when he spoke, I heard Patricia's calculated manipulation in every word. Equilibrium needs mature guidance, he said smoothly. The algorithm is brilliant, but the company culture is informal, unprofessional. My team can provide the structure needed for true global expansion. Board member after board member asked pointed questions, their loyalty to Emma and me evident in their skepticism. But Raymond had one card left to play. I think it's important the board knows the full history here, he said, producing a folder. The founder has a complicated past. Accusations of theft, family estrangement, a pattern of conflict that could pose reputational risks. Grace Winters stood up sharply. That's enough, Raymond. Whatever fiction Patricia fed you. It's all right, Grace, I interrupted calmly. I turned to face the board, my voice steady despite the rage boiling inside. Yes, I was accused of theft. Yes, I was estranged from my family because Patricia Thompson, Raymond's sister, orchestrated an elaborate fraud to steal my inheritance and destroy my relationships. She fabricated evidence, intercepted mail, and spread lies that would make a fiction writer jealous. I pulled out my phone, connecting it to the boardroom screen. What Mr. Chen doesn't know is that I've spent 3 years documenting everything. Every false filing, every fraudulent document, every piece of evidence that proves Patricia's crimes. I didn't pursue legal action because I was busy building something better than revenge. I was building equilibrium. The room was silent as I displayed document after document. Postal Service records Sarah had helped me obtain. Digital forensics reports Emma had commissioned. Even affidavits from family members who'd started questioning Patricia's stories. So yes, I concluded I have a complicated past. I was betrayed by family and rose above it. That's exactly why equilibrium exists, to give power to people who've been locked out of traditional systems. Mr. Chen is right that I'm not conventional. That's precisely why we've succeeded where conventional companies failed. Raymond's face had gone pale. He clearly hadn't expected me to have evidence, much less present it so publicly. His carefully crafted ambush had become his own humiliation. The board vote was unanimous. Symbiotic's offer was accepted. As we signed the final documents, my hands were steady despite the magnitude of the moment. $2.3 billion. 20% retained equity worth another $460 million. Emma and I were billionaires. But the sweetest moment came as Raymond packed up his materials defeat, etched in every line of his body. "Patricia won't let this go," he warned quietly. "She's invested in this outcome. Tell my stepmother something for me," I replied, matching his quiet tone. She created her worst nightmare. Every lie she told, every bridge she burned, every cruel manipulation, they all led to this moment. She didn't break me. She forged me. And now I have the resources to expose every crime she's committed. His retreat was as hasty as it was undignified. Grace squeezed my shoulder as he left. "That was masterful, but he's right about Patricia. She won't stop." "Neither will I promised. "But first we have a company to transition and employees to celebrate with." The acquisition announcement sent shockwaves through the tech world. Outlets that had ignored us suddenly wanted exclusive interviews. The financial press dissected every aspect of the deal, marveling at the favorable terms we'd negotiated. But I declined every request, focusing instead on ensuring a smooth transition for our Equilibrium family. Emma and I stood on the roof of our building that night, champagne untouched in our hands, as we watched the city sparkle below. "We did it," she said softly. "From that studio apartment to this, we actually did it." "The money is just the beginning," I replied. "Now we have the resources to do something even Patricia couldn't anticipate." "What's that?" I smiled, thinking of the beach house in Malibu. I'd already started researching the one my family had rented every summer throughout my childhood. Now we get to write the ending to this story, and I promise you it's going to be spectacular. The call from Yuki came at midnight, her voice warm with congratulations and something else. Warning. "Deborah-san, I must tell you something. After our deal was announced, we received numerous calls about you. Questions about your background, your stability, your family situation, all from people connected to Patricia Thompson." "Let them investigate," I said firmly. "I have nothing to hide anymore." "That's what concerns me," Yuki replied. "In my experience, people who work this hard to discredit someone after they've already won are planning something larger. Please be careful." I thanked her for the warning, but internally I was already thinking 3 steps ahead. Patricia had stolen 10 years of my life, turned my family against me, and tried to steal my company. She'd failed at the last, which meant she would escalate. The only question was how. As I finally fell asleep in my luxurious bed, so different from that sleeping bag on a hard floor, I dreamed of family gatherings I'd missed, birthdays, uncelebrated connections, severed. But underneath the pain was something harder, sharper. Anticipation. Patricia thought she'd destroyed me. Instead, she'd created something far more dangerous than a broken daughter. She'd created a billionaire with a score to settle and the resources to settle it perfectly. The game she'd started 10 years ago was about to reach its final moves, and this time I held all the winning cards. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, buried between congratulations on the symbiotic acquisition and interview requests I continued to decline. My assistant had flagged it as potentially significant, a commercial real estate alert for a property in Malibu that matched very specific parameters I'd set months earlier. 27 Paradise Cove Road, luxury beachfront estate, foreclosure auction. The subject line read. My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips. That address was etched into my childhood memories deeper than my own name. Every summer from age 5 to 17, my family had rented that sprawling Mediterranean-style villa for our reunions. 8 bedrooms facing the Pacific terraced gardens, where my cousins and I played hide-and-seek, the massive kitchen, where Grandma Sophie taught us her secret recipes, the private beach, where Grandpa James told stories about his Navy days until the stars came out. Emma looked up from her laptop as I made a strangled sound. "What's wrong?" "The Paradise Cove house is in foreclosure," I managed to say. Our family's summer place. She knew immediately what I meant. During our darkest days in that studio apartment, I'd described every detail of those magical summers, using the memories as fuel to keep going when everything seemed hopeless. The house had become a symbol of everything Patricia had stolen from me, not just property or money, but belonging itself. "Are you thinking what I think you're thinking?" Emma asked carefully. "I need to make some calls," I replied, already pulling up my contacts, starting with our real estate team. What I discovered over the next 72 hours was a fascinating story of financial mismanagement and cosmic justice. The property's owner, Richard Castellano, had over-leveraged himself during the pandemic, using the Malibu estate as collateral for a series of failed hotel ventures. Now, 5 banks were circling like vultures, preparing for a messy public auction that would likely result in the property being subdivided and developed. My real estate attorney, Sandra Kim, laid out the situation with her characteristic precision. The total debt is $42 million. The property's worth $65 million in this market, maybe $70 with the right buyer. But here's the interesting part. Castellano is desperate to avoid the public humiliation of auction. He'd take $35 million cash for a quick, quiet sale. "Do it," I said without hesitation, "but not in my name. Use the holding company structure we discussed." Sandra raised an eyebrow. "The 7-layer setup. That's usually reserved for much more sensitive acquisitions." "This is sensitive," I assured her. "I need complete anonymity until the moment I choose to reveal ownership. Can you make it happen?" She smiled the shark-like grin that made her worth every penny of her astronomical fees. "Give me 2 weeks and unlimited legal budget. I'll bury the ownership trails so deep even the FBI would get lost." While Sandra worked her magic, I dove into planning renovations that would serve my purposes perfectly. The house needed updating anyway. The kitchen hadn't been touched since the 90s. The technology infrastructure was non-existent, and the security consisted of a few decorative cameras that probably didn't even work. I hired Elena Rostova, a security consultant who specialized in discreet installations for high-net-worth individuals. She designed safe rooms for billionaires and panic bunkers for politicians. When I explained what I needed, her eyes lit up with professional interest. "You want complete surveillance coverage that's invisible to guests," she summarized after our 3rd planning session. "Facial recognition at all entry points, audio recording capabilities in common areas, and a command center that looks like a luxury home office, plus remote access to everything." "Exactly. I want to see and hear everything that happens in that house from anywhere in the world." "May I ask why?" Elena inquired carefully. "This level of surveillance is usually reserved for heads of state or people with serious enemies." "Let's just say I'm expecting some very specific guests who don't know they're being watched," I replied. "Everything needs to be legal, but comprehensive. I want to know every word spoken, every face that enters, every moment that occurs." The purchase went through with Swiss watch precision. Castellano was so relieved to avoid public embarrassment that he barely questioned the Baroque ownership structure Sandra had created. The deed passed through 7 different LLCs, 3 offshore trusts, and 2 law firms before landing in a holding company whose ownership was protected by attorney-client privilege. I visited the property for the first time in 13 years on a foggy Thursday morning, accompanied only by Emma. The massive iron gates that had always seemed welcoming now felt like guards standing at attention. As we drove up the winding driveway, memories crashed over me in waves. There was the oak tree where Marcus broke his arm trying to impress Jennifer's friends. The fountain where Patricia posed for photos at what would be my last family reunion, already planning her campaign against me. The garden bench where Mom told me she was sick, trying to keep her voice light as my world shattered. "You okay?" Emma asked softly as I parked in front of the main entrance. "I will be," I said, stepping out and breathing the salt-tinged air. "Once this becomes what it needs to be." The house was even grander than memory suggested. 16,000 square feet of Mediterranean elegance with arched doorways, hand-painted tiles, and floor-to-ceiling windows framing perfect ocean views. But underneath the beauty, I saw the bones of my plan. Elena's team worked with surgical efficiency over the next month. Cameras no bigger than shirt buttons were embedded in crown molding and light fixtures. Microphones that could pick up whispers were hidden in planters and picture frames. The command center took over a guest bedroom, transforming it into something from a spy movie. Banks of monitors, recording equipment, and secure servers, all hidden behind what appeared to be custom built-in bookshelves. The beauty of this system, Elena explained during the final walkthrough, is that it's all controlled by your phone or laptop. You could be in Tokyo and still see everything happening here in real time. The facial recognition will alert you the moment someone enters the property, and the AI can even transcribe conversations automatically. Meanwhile, I hired a property management company with very specific instructions. The house would be available for exclusive corporate retreats and private events, marketed through channels that wealthy Californians monitored. But there was one booking that would take priority over all others. A certain weekend in August, when my family traditionally held their reunion. The renovations cost $15 million on top of the purchase price, but I considered every penny an investment. The kitchen became a culinary showcase that would make any food-loving family weep with envy. The bedrooms were appointed with luxury linens and smart home features. The pool area was transformed into a resort-worthy oasis. But the pièce de résistance was the study. My grandmother's favorite room where she'd kept photo albums documenting decades of family history. I recreated it exactly as it had been, down to the vintage leather chairs and the grandfather clock that chimed ship's bells. The only addition was a hidden safe containing copies of every document related to Patricia's crimes against me. George Hoffman, the property manager I'd hired, was a silver-haired professional who'd handled estates for Hollywood royalty and tech titans. I'd chosen him specifically because he had no connections to my family's social circles, but maintained the kind of discreet professionalism that would appeal to Patricia's pretensions. I have some very specific requirements, I told him during our first meeting. This property has sentimental value to certain families in the Pasadena area. If anyone inquires about booking it for a family reunion in August, I want to know immediately. His expression didn't change, but I saw the calculating look that meant he understood this was about more than rental income. Any particular families I should watch for? The Thompson-Mitchell or Harrison families, I said, listing the main branches of my family tree. They often vacation together. If they reach out, the house is available for that weekend at a special rate. Let's say $5,000 for the weekend instead of the usual $25,000. Very generous, George murmured. Should I mention the new ownership? Absolutely not. As far as they know, it's the same property they've always loved, just under new management. The owner is a private investor who prefers to remain anonymous. 6 weeks after the renovations were complete, George called with the news I'd been waiting for. A Patricia Thompson just inquired about the property for August 15th through 18th. She mentioned her family has history with the house and was thrilled to hear it's available for rental. My hands trembled with anticipation, but I kept my voice steady. Perfect. Give her the special rate. Make her feel like she's getting an exclusive deal. And George. Make sure everything is absolutely perfect for their arrival. I want this to be a reunion they'll never forget. After ending the call, I pulled up the command center interface on my laptop. The cameras showed every angle of the property in crystal clear resolution. With a few clicks, I could zoom in on any room replay, any moment, capture any conversation. Patricia thought she was planning another family reunion that excluded me. She had no idea she was walking into my carefully constructed web. Emma found me there hours later, still staring at the screens. You're really going through with this? They stole 10 years from me, I said quietly. Convinced everyone I was a thief and an addict. Made me disappear from family history like I never existed. So yes, I'm going through with it. But Emma, I'm not going to hurt anyone. I'm just going to let them tell the truth for once. She sat beside me studying the monitors. What's your endgame? They show up, realize you own the house, and then what? Then they have a choice, I replied. Face the truth about what they did to me or leave. But either way, they'll know that I didn't disappear. I didn't fail. I survived and thrived beyond their wildest dreams. And the house where they celebrated my exile, it's mine now. Over the following weeks, I refined every detail of the plan. The staff would all be actors hired through a discreet agency and coached on their roles. The concierge, Robert, was a former RSC performer who specialized in authority figures. The housekeepers, gardeners, and chef were all professionals who understood they were part of an elaborate piece of theater. I even planted specific touches throughout the house that only my family would recognize. Mom's favorite tea in the kitchen, the board game collection we'd accumulated over 20 summers, photo albums in the study that stopped abruptly in the year of my exile like a visual accusation. The night before my family's arrival, I stood in the master bedroom looking out at the Pacific, the same view I'd watched as a child dreaming about what I'd become. Back then, I imagined being a doctor like Mom or a teacher like Grandma Sophie. I never imagined being a billionaire preparing to confront the family that threw me away. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Remember what you told me in the beginning. Success is the best revenge only if you're actually successful for yourself. Don't let them take that from you. She was right, of course. I'd built equilibrium for the world, not for revenge. I'd bought this house for the memories it held, not just for this moment. But sometimes, the universe aligns in ways that demand recognition. Patricia had created this situation through years of careful cruelty. All I was doing was providing the stage for the truth to finally emerge. As I activated the recording systems and prepared to monitor everything from my hotel suite down the coast, I thought about the 18-year-old girl who'd last stayed in this house. She'd been innocent, trusting, surrounded by family who claimed to love her. That girl was gone, destroyed by betrayal and reborn through struggle. In her place stood someone harder but not bitter, successful but not cruel. Someone who understood that family wasn't about blood but about loyalty. And someone who knew that the best way to expose a liar wasn't to scream the truth, but to create circumstances where they revealed themselves. The Paradise Cove house was ready. The stage was set. And in less than 24 hours, my family would walk into a reunion unlike any they'd imagined. They thought they were returning to a cherished vacation spot for another weekend of manufactured memories without the embarrassing reminder of their exiled daughter. They had no idea they were walking into my house, where every word would be recorded, every reaction captured, and every lie would finally meet the truth. The property that had hosted their celebrations of my absence now belonged to the very person they'd tried to erase. Patricia had stolen my past, but I'd purchased their future, and the price of admission was going to be honesty, whether they wanted it or not. The intelligence I gathered over the next month painted a picture of a family that had rewritten history so thoroughly they believed their own fiction. Through the private investigator firm I'd hired, run by former FBI agents who specialized in corporate intelligence, I gained access to the family group chat Patricia managed through a messaging app. The conversations were revealing in their casual cruelty. Can't believe it's been 10 years since our last Paradise Cove reunion. Patricia had written attaching photos from that final summer. Every image had been carefully curated to exclude me, though I could see where I'd been cropped out. A mysterious elbow here, a shadow there, the edge of my sundress, in what had been a group photo. Marcus had replied, "Mom would have loved knowing we're keeping the tradition alive." Jennifer added, "It's what she would have wanted. Family staying together through everything." The irony was suffocating. Our mother would have been horrified to know they'd abandoned her daughter based on lies. But Patricia had done her work well, weaving me into their narrative as a cautionary tale rather than a family member. My investigator David Park had assembled dossiers on each family member attending. The changes in their lives were fascinating. Marcus had become a middling real estate agent, successful enough, but haunted by what colleagues described as trust issues that cost him major deals. Jennifer worked as a teacher but had been passed over for department head 3 times, with evaluators citing difficulty with confrontation and tendency to avoid hard decisions. "There's something else," David said during one of our secure video calls. "Your cousin Madison, Jennifer's daughter, has been asking questions. She found old photos in an attic box and noticed someone had been edited out. She's 17, smart, and apparently driving Patricia crazy with her investigations." Madison. She'd been 7 when I was exiled, too young to remember me clearly, but old enough to sense the gaps in family lore. According to David's research, she ran a true crime podcast from her bedroom, focusing on family secrets and hidden histories. She posted something interesting last week. David continued sharing his screen. A TikTok asking if anyone else had family members who just disappeared and whether that was normal. It got 2 million views. I studied Madison's face in the video. She had Jennifer's eyes but a sharper edge, an unwillingness to accept comfortable lies that her mother lacked. Perhaps every family needed one truth seeker per generation. The group chat revealed the reunion planning in exhaustive detail. Patricia had assigned roles like a military commander. Marcus would handle transportation. Jennifer managed meals. Cousins brought entertainment. They discussed everything from wine preferences to beach volleyball tournaments, creating an itinerary that mimicked our childhood summers with eerie precision. "Remember, no phones during family game night," Patricia had decreed. "This weekend is about connection, not screens." The hypocrisy was breathtaking from a woman who'd used technology to systematically isolate me, but her phone ban would work in my favor. They'd be less likely to discover the house's ownership if they weren't constantly online. Through George, I monitored every interaction with the property. Patricia had called 3 times with increasingly specific requests. She wanted the master suite, of course, demanded the kitchen be stocked with particular brands, and insisted the house be child-proofed, despite Madison being the youngest at 17. She also asked about the security system, George reported. Wanted to know if there were cameras, said her family values privacy. "What did you tell her?" "That the property has standard security at entry points but respects guests' privacy inside the home," he said smoothly. She seemed satisfied. Perfect. Let her believe her secrets were safe within those walls. The planning messages revealed other fascinating dynamics. Extended family members who'd barely spoken in years were suddenly active, drawn by the promise of a free weekend at a $50 million estate. Aunt Helen, who'd always been kind but weak, sent long messages about looking forward to healing family bonds. Uncle Richard, my mother's brother, who'd sided with Patricia to preserve his business connections to my father, pompously declared he would lead sunrise beach meditations. But it was the younger generation that interested me most. Besides Madison, there were 6 cousins between 15 and 25. They'd grown up hearing stories about their cautionary tale cousin who'd betrayed family trust. Now they were digital natives who could fact-check claims in seconds and spot doctored photos with casual expertise. "The kids have a separate group chat," David informed me during another call. "Want to guess what they call it?" I'm afraid to ask. "Surviving Paradise Cove." Apparently they think family reunions are torture and have a whole bingo card of predictable Patterson behaviors. Square B5 is Aunt Patricia cries about family unity. I laughed despite myself. Even in exile, it seemed I wasn't the only one who saw through some of the performance. As August approached, I made my own preparations. I booked a suite at Shutters on the beach, close enough to monitor everything but far enough to avoid accidental encounters. Emma would join me for moral support, though she'd made me promise not to watch the feeds obsessively. "You need activities between surveillance sessions," she insisted. "Spa treatments, beach walks, actual meals. You're confronting your past, not becoming consumed by it." I also prepared for various contingencies. What if someone recognized the renovation work as too expensive for a rental? What if Patricia's paranoia led her to investigate the property's ownership? What if, and this was the scenario that kept me awake, what if one of them actually expressed regret for what they'd done? Sandra Kim had prepared legal documents for every possibility. If Patricia became violent, unlikely but possible, we had restraining orders ready. If she tried to damage the property, we had prosecution procedures in place. If, and this seemed most likely, she tried to spin the revelation as another manipulation, we had 10 years of evidence ready to deploy. You could just reveal yourself immediately, Sandra suggested during our final preparation meeting. Why the elaborate theater? Because they need to show their true selves first, I explained. If I appear immediately, Patricia spins it as an ambush by unstable Deborah. But if they arrive believing their safe talk, freely reveal how they really feel about what happened, then the truth has context. 3 days before the reunion, something unexpected happened. A message appeared in the family group chat from a number I didn't recognize. Is anyone else uncomfortable with how we never talk about Deborah? It's been 10 years. Maybe it's time to reconsider things. The message sat unanswered for 17 minutes before Patricia responded, "This isn't the time or place. We've discussed this. Some wounds are too deep to heal." But the damage was done. Other messages trickled in. Cousin Michael. I barely remember her, but wasn't she always nice to us kids? Aunt Helen. Perhaps we could discuss it in person with compassion. Even Marcus, after another hour. Maybe we should at least acknowledge what happened. Patricia shut it down with surgical precision. The past is past. This reunion is about celebrating our family's strength in overcoming adversity. I won't have the weekend ruined by rehashing painful history. Anyone who can't respect that should reconsider attending. The chat went silent after that, but David reported increased private messaging between family members. The seed of doubt had been planted, and it was growing despite Patricia's efforts to salt the earth. The night before their arrival, I sat in my hotel suite watching the house cameras as the staff made final preparations. Robert, the actor playing concierge, walked through his blocking with theatrical precision. The house gleamed with invitation, every surface polished, every comfort anticipated. My phone rang. George with a final update. Mrs. Thompson called to confirm their 3 p.m. arrival. She also asked if the house has hosted any other events recently. I told her it's been privately held, waiting for the right guests. She seemed pleased by the exclusivity. Of course she did. Patricia loved feeling special, chosen, elevated above others. She had no idea how specially chosen she actually was. After ending the call, I opened my laptop to review the weekend's plans one more time. Everything was in place. The house was ready. The staff was prepared. The recording systems were functioning perfectly. All that remained was for my family to walk through those doors and reveal whether 10 years had changed them or simply calcified their cruelty. Emma arrived just after midnight, finding me on the hotel balcony, staring at the distant lights of Paradise Cove. "Second thoughts?" she asked, handing me a cup of tea. "No," I said firmly. "Just processing. Tomorrow I watch my family have the reunion they denied me, see them celebrate in the house they pushed me out of, listen to them tell stories that erase my existence. Or," Emma suggested gently, "you watch them finally question the narrative they've been fed. That message in the group chat, someone's conscience is stirring." She was right, but I couldn't afford hope. Hope had been beaten out of me in that dining room 10 years ago when my father chose Patricia's lies over his daughter's truth. Tomorrow wasn't about hope. It was about reality consequences and the kind of justice that comes not from revenge, but from revelation. I raised my teacup to the distant house, to family reunions. I toasted with bitter irony. May this one finally live up to its name. The stage was set. The players were preparing, and in less than 15 hours, the curtain would rise on a performance 10 years in the making. They thought they were arriving for a celebration. They had no idea they were walking into an intervention, one where the truth would finally have its day and the ghost they'd created would prove more real than their comfortable lies. I woke at 5 a.m. on August 15th, my body thrumming with an energy that had nothing to do with the early hour. Through the hotel window, marine fog blanketed the coast, but I could see Paradise Cove in the distance, waiting like a stage before the performance begins. Emma was already awake, making coffee in our suite's kitchen. "Couldn't sleep either," she asked, handing me a mug. "I've been preparing for this day for 10 years," I replied. "Sleep feels irrelevant." By 6 a.m., I was in position at my makeshift command center. 3 laptops arranged on the hotel suite's dining table, each showing different camera feeds from the house. The property was serene in the morning light waves, gently lapping the private beach gardens sparkling with dew, beautiful and treacherous like Patricia herself. The staff began arriving at 7. Robert, our concierge, moved through the house with the bearing of a Royal Shakespeare Company lead, preparing for Lear. He tested the intercom system, practiced his slight British accent. Patricia would eat that up and reviewed the guest list with theatrical concentration. "Remember," I said through the secure communication app we'd established, "you don't know who these people are beyond their reservation. You're just a high-end concierge doing your job. Let them reveal themselves." "Understood," Robert replied with the calm of a man who'd performed for royalty. "Though I must say the dramatic irony is delicious. Chekhov would approve." The housekeeping staff, all trained actors from a company that specialized in immersive experiences, went through their choreographed preparations. They would be invisible until needed present, but unobtrusive, the perfect backdrop for a family that preferred servants to be neither seen nor heard. By noon, George called with intel from his network. The family's gathering at a hotel in Santa Monica for lunch before heading over. 43 confirmed attendees, including some +1s I don't have information on. 43 people. When I was last at Paradise Cove, our reunions had 30 at most. Patricia had expanded the guest list, probably to dilute any awkward questions about missing family members. More people meant more chaos, less intimate conversation, fewer opportunities for anyone to notice the ghost-shaped hole in their gathering. At 1 p.m., I watched Patricia arrive early with my father to prepare the house. She swept in wearing designer resort wear and an expression of proprietary satisfaction. My father followed slowly, looking every one of his 72 years. The decade hadn't been kind to him. His hair was white, his shoulders stooped, his movements careful in a way that suggested more than physical frailty. "Everything must be perfect," Patricia announced to Robert, who met them with exactly calibrated deference. "This is a very important weekend for our family." "Of course, madam," Robert replied smoothly. "The house has been prepared to the highest standards. May I show you to your suite?" I switched cameras to follow them through the house. Patricia critiqued everything with the air of someone who'd grown accustomed to luxury, not someone who'd married into modest wealth and stolen to maintain appearances. She tested mattresses, examined closets, and rearranged flowers that were already perfect. But it was my father who drew my attention. He moved through the house like a sleepwalker, occasionally touching walls or door frames with a faraway expression. In the study, he stopped entirely staring at the photo albums I'd strategically placed. "Thomas, come along," Patricia called sharply. "We need to check the kitchen supplies." He followed obediently, but not before I caught him slipping one of the older albums into his jacket. My mother's album from the summer she was pregnant with me. My throat tightened unexpectedly. By 2 p.m., the advance guard began arriving. Marcus pulled up in a Tesla he couldn't afford according to David's financial investigation. Jennifer arrived in a minivan packed with teenagers who immediately scattered to claim bedrooms. Cousins, aunts, uncles, a parade of people who'd chosen Patricia's fiction over my reality. I cataloged each arrival, noting changes and continuities. Uncle Richard had developed a pompous beard to match his personality. Aunt Helen looked fragile, moving with the careful steps of someone navigating more than physical terrain. The younger cousins had grown from children into young adults. I didn't recognize their faces, familiar but foreign. Then Madison arrived and my breath caught. She looked like Jennifer at 17, but her eyes held a sharpness her mother's never had. While others rushed to claim rooms or greet relatives, Madison stood in the entrance hall, slowly turning in a circle, observing everything with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle. "Something feels different," she said to no one in particular. Jennifer bustled over, already in full anxiety mode. "Don't start, Madison. Just enjoy the weekend, please, for me." "I'm just saying the whole vibe is off, like we're being watched or something." If only she knew how right she was. Every word she spoke was being recorded, every expression cataloged. The irony wasn't lost on me. The teenager everyone dismissed as dramatic was the only one sensing the truth. As 3 p.m. approached, tension built in my chest like a gathering storm. The entire extended family was assembling in the main living area, their voices creating a familiar cacophony of overlapping conversations, laughter, and children's shrieks. It was achingly familiar and utterly foreign simultaneously. Patricia held court from the central sofa, directing traffic like a conductor. "Marcus, make sure everyone has their room assignments. Jennifer, did you coordinate the meal schedule? Helen, please tell me you brought the photo albums for tonight's memory sharing." Memory sharing, as if their memories weren't carefully edited to exclude inconvenient truths. Then something unexpected happened. Young cousin Lucy, no longer 8 but 18 and headed to college, pulled out a worn purple envelope from her bag. "Aunt Patricia, I found this in my old room. It's a birthday card from cousin Deborah that came back marked, 'Return to sender.' Should I throw it away?" The room went silent. Not completely. The ocean still murmured through open windows, the house still hummed with electricity. But human silence, sudden and absolute. Even the teenagers sensed the shift, looking up from their phones with predatory interest. Patricia's recovery was swift, but not swift enough. I saw the micro-expression of panic before her mask slid back into place. "Oh, sweetie, that's from a very long time ago. Some things are better left in the past." "But why was it returned?" Lucy persisted with the innocence of someone who genuinely didn't understand. "The address is right. I checked." "It's complicated, dear," my father said quietly, speaking for the first time since arrival. "Perhaps we can discuss it later. Or we could discuss it now." Madison suggested, her true crime instincts fully engaged. "Lucy's got a point. Mail doesn't just get returned for no reason. Was there a forwarding issue, a postal problem?" I watched Patricia's face cycle through calculations. Shut it down and risk looking suspicious, or deflect and hope the moment passed, she chose deflection. "You know what, you're right. It is strange. There must have been some postal mix-up. These things happen. Now who wants to see their rooms?" But the seed was planted. As people dispersed to settle in small groups formed with hushed conversations, I switched between camera feeds, catching fragments. Always wondered what really happened. Patricia said drugs, but that doesn't explain the mail. Remember when she was little, so sweet? Something doesn't add up. At 4 p.m., Robert's voice came through the intercom. "Pardon the interruption, but I've been asked to remind all guests that dinner will be served at 7, with cocktails beginning at 6. The owner has also left a welcome gift in the study for the Thompson family to enjoy." I smiled grimly. The gift was a carefully curated selection of family photos spanning 50 years, everyone featuring me prominently. Let them try to celebrate their edited history with evidence of the truth staring them in the face. Patricia's reaction was immediate. She rushed to the study, returning with arms full of frames. "How thoughtful," she announced with forced brightness. "Though some of these are quite old. We should update them with recent photos." "Why?" Madison asked, having materialized at her shoulder. "Who's that in all these pictures? The one someone tried to crop out?" "That's," Jennifer started, then looked to Patricia for guidance. "A former family member," Patricia said firmly. "Someone who made choices that hurt the family deeply. We don't discuss it out of respect for those who were affected." Bullshit. Madison said clearly, causing several gasps. "You can't just delete people from existence. What did she do? Murder someone, burn down a house, steal the nuclear codes?" "Madison." Jennifer's voice was sharp with panic. "Language, and this isn't appropriate." "What's not appropriate is pretending someone never existed," Madison shot back. "I've done research. Deborah Thompson existed. She was part of this family. Then suddenly she wasn't. That's not normal." The room erupted. Some family members tried to shut down the conversation, others demanded answers, while the youngest generation pulled out phones to fact-check in real time. Patricia's careful control was fracturing, and we hadn't even reached dinner yet. I watched it all from my hotel room, fingers pressed against my lips to hold in. What laughter, tears, screams. Madison was doing what I'd never been able to do, demanding truth in a space where lies had flourished. Her generation had no patience for comfortable deceptions. "Enough," Patricia's voice cut through the chaos. "This is a family reunion, not an interrogation. If you can't respect the peace of this weekend, perhaps you should reconsider your attendance." "Perhaps you should reconsider your stories," Madison muttered, but she was drowned out by adults quickly changing subjects and ushering young people to different rooms. By 5 p.m., the house had settled into an uneasy simulation of normalcy. People unpacked, children played on the beach, adults mixed drinks with slightly shaking hands. But I could see the undercurrents. Whispered conversations in corners, surreptitious Google searches, long looks at the photos Patricia hadn't managed to hide quickly enough. Emma brought me a sandwich I didn't remember ordering. "You need to eat, and maybe blink. You've been staring at those screens for hours." "Did you see Madison?" I asked, accepting the food but not taking my eyes off the monitors. "She's magnificent. Jennifer's daughter has the spine her mother never grew." "I saw," Emma said gently. "I also saw your father sneaking photos into his room, and at least 5 family members taking pictures of the old albums. The truth wants out, Deborah. It's been pushing against Patricia's lies for 10 years. She was right. I could see it in the forced nature of their celebrations, the awkward pauses in conversation, the way certain names were avoided like verbal landmines. They'd built a decade on a foundation of lies, and the structure was showing cracks. As 6 p.m. approached, cocktail hour when tongues would loosen and guards would drop, I prepared for the next act. The staff had been instructed to be generous with the wine, subtle with their presence, and ready for anything. "Let them drink," I'd told George. "Let them relax. Let them think they're safe in their bubble of privilege and denial. Because tomorrow, when they realize whose house they're in, I want them to remember every word they said tonight." Robert's voice echoed through the house. "Ladies and gentlemen, cocktails are served on the terrace. The owner has provided a selection from their private wine collection, including a 1982 Chateau d'Yquem that I'm told holds special significance for the Thompson family." I smiled coldly. 1982. The year I was born. Let them toast with wine from the year they'd tried to erase. Every sip would carry the taste of their betrayal, whether they knew it or not. The sun was beginning its descent toward the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of guilt and gold. My family gathered on the terrace, glasses in hand, ready to perform their annual ritual of false unity. They had no idea their entire charade was being watched, recorded, preserved for posterity. Tomorrow they would learn the truth, but tonight they would reveal it themselves, one unguarded comment at a time. The stage was set, the actors in place, and the most important performance of their lives was about to begin. They thought they were safe in their stolen paradise. They were wrong. I woke before dawn on Saturday, August 16th, my body coiled with anticipation. Tonight's dinner would be their last in ignorance. Tomorrow morning, when they prepared to leave, they'd discover the truth. But first, I had one more full day to observe them in their natural habitat of denial. The morning feeds showed a family moving through practiced routines. Patricia orchestrated breakfast with military precision, while my father sat alone on the deck, staring at the ocean. Jennifer corralled teenagers who clearly wanted to be anywhere else. Marcus jogged on the beach, probably calculating commission rates to pay for the Tesla payment. At 9 a.m., something shifted. A rental car pulled up to the gates, not on the guest list George had provided. Through the camera, I watched an elderly woman emerge, moving with the careful dignity of someone who'd earned every one of their 80-plus years. "Holy shit," Emma breathed beside me. "Is that Grandma Sophie's sister?" I confirmed my voice, barely a whisper. "Great Aunt Miriam. She hasn't attended family events in 20 years. Robert's voice crackled through the intercom. "There's a Miriam Goldstein at the gate. She claims to be family but isn't on the list." I watched Patricia's face on the living room camera as she received the news. Pure panic flickered before she composed herself. "Of course. Please let her in. She's a surprise guest." Miriam entered like a force of nature despite her age. She wore all black despite the August heat, her silver hair pinned in the same style I remembered from childhood. Her eyes, sharp as a raptor's, swept the assembled family with obvious displeasure. "Patricia," she said, her voice carrying decades of Brooklyn steel. "Imagine my surprise when young Madison here messaged me about a family reunion. A family reunion I wasn't invited to. Again." Madison stepped out from behind a pillar, phone in hand, looking like a cat who'd not only gotten the cream, but the entire dairy. "I found Great Aunt Miriam on Ancestry.com. Figured if we were having a family reunion, we should have all the family." "You had no right," Patricia started, but Miriam cut her off with a gesture. "Rights. Let's discuss rights. Like the right to attend my sister Sophie's funeral, the right to know why my great-niece Deborah disappeared, the right to the truth instead of the fiction you've been peddling." The room went silent. Even the ocean seemed to pause. I found myself leaning forward, my heart hammering. Miriam had been my grandmother's closest confidant, the keeper of family stories Patricia couldn't control. "Miriam, please," my father said weakly. "This isn't the time." "When is the time, Thomas? When we're all dead. When there's no one left who remembers the truth." Miriam settled into a chair like a judge taking the bench. "Madison asked me about the missing girl in the photos. Should I tell her, or will you—" "There's nothing to tell," Patricia said, but her voice lacked its usual authority. "Nothing." Miriam's laugh was harsh. "Sophie wrote me letters, Patricia, every week until she died. I know about the money you borrowed from her accounts, the signatures you forged, the way you isolated her from anyone who might ask questions." "You're confused," Patricia said desperately. "Elderly people often—" "My mind is sharp as a tack, and you know it," Miriam snapped. "Just like I know Deborah never stole anything. Just like I know you intercepted my letters to her, returned her mail to me, told the family I was senile when I tried to defend her." The room erupted. Family members who'd been silent for a decade suddenly had questions. How did Miriam know about returned mail? What letters? What borrowed money? The younger generation had their phones out, recording everything, their instincts for drama finally serving justice. I watched Patricia try to regain control, but it was like watching someone try to hold back the ocean with their hands. The truth had found its champion in an 83-year-old woman who'd waited 20 years for this moment. "Show them Madison," Miriam commanded. "Show them what real investigation looks like, not Patricia's fairy tales." Madison connected her phone to the living room TV with the fluid motion of her generation. Suddenly, the screen filled with documents, postal receipts, bank records, emails. My investigator David had been thorough, but Madison had been brilliant, using her great-aunt's memories to guide her search. 3 months ago, I started looking into our missing cousin. Madison narrated with the confidence of someone who'd found their calling. What I found was a pattern of fraud mail, tampering, and systematic isolation that would make a cult leader proud. "Turn it off." Patricia lunged for the TV, but Marcus and Jennifer's husband held her back. "No," Jennifer said quietly, and I saw something shift in her face. "Let her finish. I want to see." What followed was a masterclass in investigative presentation. Madison had compiled evidence I didn't even know existed. security footage from the post office showing Patricia filing false change of address forms, bank records showing transfers from my grandmother's accounts to Patricia's personal shopping funds, email metadata proving Patricia had accessed my accounts after I'd been exiled. The technical term is mail fraud, Madison said calmly. Also, identity theft, elder financial abuse, and conspiracy to defraud. I have a friend at the FBI who says this could be a 20-year sentence, minimum. Patricia's face had gone from red to white to a sickly gray. You don't understand. Deborah was troubled. She was going to destroy the family. I protected all of you. From what? Miriam demanded. From a young woman who loved you all, who spent every moment she could caring for her dying mother. What terrible crime did she commit except existing? She knows, Patricia screamed, finally cracking. She knows what I did before. In my first marriage, she was going to expose everything. The admission hung in the air like a confession at Judgment Day. I sat frozen in my hotel room processing this revelation. What had I known? What had I suspected that made me such a threat? Then it clicked. The conversations with Mom during her final weeks, her concerns about Patricia's previous husband's sudden death, the life insurance policy that had funded Patricia's lifestyle between marriages. Mom had asked me to look into it to protect Dad, but she died before I could investigate. So you destroyed her instead, Miriam said softly. Convinced Thomas his daughter was a thief, turned the family against her, made her disappear so your secrets would too. It worked, didn't it? Patricia laughed bitterly. 10 years of peace, 10 years of being the perfect stepmother, the family matriarch, until you had to ruin everything. I didn't ruin anything, Madison said firmly. You did. Every lie you told, every letter you returned, every family member you manipulated. It's all here. Documented, verified, ready for law enforcement. That's when my father stood up. He'd been silent through the entire confrontation, but now he moved with purpose I hadn't seen in years. He walked to the study and returned with the photo album he'd hidden, my mother's album. I've carried this for 10 years, he said, his voice breaking. Hidden it from you, Patricia, because I knew you'd destroy it, just like you destroyed my daughter. I let you convince me she was guilty because believing you was easier than facing what I'd married. He opened the album to a page I remembered. Mom pregnant with me, standing in front of this very house, my father's arms around her, both glowing with anticipation. Sophia warned me, he continued. In her final days, she tried to tell me about your first husband, about the money. But I was so grateful to have someone managing the house, managing the grief, that I ignored her. And when Deborah brought me evidence about the missing money, I chose you. God help me, I chose you. Patricia tried to speak, but no words came. The family that had rallied around her for a decade was seeing her clearly for the first time, and the vision was horrifying. Where is she? Jennifer asked quietly. Where's Deborah? Is she even alive? I don't know, my father whispered. I've looked. Hired investigators, but she vanished completely, like we taught her she should. I wanted to appear then, to walk through those doors and show them what their cruelty had created, but something held me back, a whisper of Emma's wisdom about not letting revenge consume the victory. This wasn't my moment yet. This was theirs to face what they'd done without the distraction of my presence. She's alive, Miriam said firmly. I know because I never stopped looking, never stopped believing. Somewhere out there, Sophie's daughter survived what you did to her, and someday when she's ready, she'll come home, to the family that deserves her, not the one that threw her away. As if on cue, Robert's voice echoed through the house. Ladies and gentlemen, dinner will be served shortly. The owner has requested I remind you that checkout is at 10 a.m. tomorrow. They hope you've enjoyed your stay at Paradise Cove and that it's been enlightening. The word choice wasn't accidental. I'd written that script myself, wanting them to feel the walls closing in without understanding why. Tomorrow morning, those walls would collapse entirely when they discovered whose house they'd been exposing their secrets in. I can't stay here, Patricia said, her voice small and defeated. Not with all of you looking at me like that." "You'll stay," Miriam commanded. "You'll stay and face what you've done. Tomorrow we decide whether Madison gives her evidence to the authorities or whether you confess everything to Deborah yourself if we can find her. But tonight you sit with your guilt. Let it eat at you the way it's eaten at Thomas for 10 years. The family dispersed slowly, shell-shocked by revelations that had shattered their comfortable narrative. Some comforted my father, who wept openly for the first time since my mother's funeral. Others huddled around Miriam and Madison, the unlikely alliance of age and youth that had brought down Patricia's empire of lies. Patricia herself sat alone on the same sofa where she'd held court just yesterday, her kingdom in ruins around her. She looked older, smaller, like a witch whose power had been broken by simple truth. I watched until the sun set, painting the sky the color of justice delayed, but not denied. Tomorrow they would learn the full scope of their situation, that every confession had been recorded, every tear documented, every truth captured by the very person they'd tried to erase. But tonight was for them to sit with their choices, to understand what they'd lost, to begin comprehending the magnitude of their betrayal. The entry confrontation was over, but the real reckoning had just begun, and I held all the cards they'd spent 10 years pretending didn't exist. Dawn broke gray and subdued on Sunday morning, matching the atmosphere inside the house. Through the cameras, I watched my family move like ghosts through their morning routines. Patricia hadn't left her room. My father sat in the study, surrounded by photo albums, apparently having spent the night revisiting memories he'd buried. The younger generation huddled in clusters, processing yesterday's revelations through TikToks and group chats. At precisely 8 a.m., Robert's voice echoed through the intercom system. "Good morning. I apologize for the interruption, but we have an urgent security matter. Per California state law and our insurance requirements, we need to conduct brief individual interviews regarding an incident reported last evening. Please gather in the main living room." I smiled grimly. There was no state law, no insurance requirement. But my family didn't know that, and their guilt would make them compliant. The incident was vague enough to mean anything: Madison's accusations, Patricia's breakdown, or something else entirely. They assembled slowly, looking haggard and confused. Miriam sat regally in her chosen chair, clearly planning to enjoy whatever came next. Madison had her phone ready, documenting everything. The others arranged themselves in careful clusters, Patricia notably absent until Jennifer physically retrieved her. Robert appeared in full concierge regalia, carrying an official-looking tablet and wearing an expression of professional concern. "Thank you all for cooperating. Last evening, our security system detected what we call an accountability event, a situation requiring documentation for legal purposes." "What kind of situation?" Marcus asked nervously. "That's what we need to determine," Robert replied smoothly. "Our owner takes guest safety very seriously. When our systems flag potential fraud, identity theft, or other criminal activities discussed on the property, we're obligated to investigate." The room went silent. Patricia swayed slightly, gripping Jennifer's arm. "You've been recording us," Uncle Richard demanded, his pompous meditation leader persona cracking. "The property disclosure you signed clearly states that common areas have security monitoring." Robert said, producing a document none of them had actually read. "For your protection, of course. Now we'll need to interview each of you individually. Should take no more than 10 minutes per person. Who'd like to go first?" Nobody volunteered. The silence stretched until Miriam stood with a warrior's grin. "I'll go. I've got nothing to hide and plenty to say." She followed Robert to the improvised interview room. Actually, the breakfast nook transformed with strategic lighting and a camera angle that would capture every micro-expression. I had a direct feed to Robert's earpiece, though I'd promised to use it sparingly. "Please state your name for the record," Robert began. "Miriam Goldstein," sister of Sophie Thompson, great-aunt of the stolen child Deborah Thompson, and witness to 10 years of family fraud orchestrated by Patricia Thompson. Robert didn't even have to prompt her. Miriam unleashed 20 years of suppressed truth, detailing dates, conversations, and evidence with the precision of someone who'd been preparing for this moment. She spoke of Patricia's isolation tactics, the suspicious circumstances of her first husband's death, and Sophie's deathbed warnings about the woman who'd married her son-in-law. My sister knew, Miriam concluded. She tried to protect Deborah, even left documents proving Patricia's theft. But grief makes people stupid, and Thomas was grieving. We all were. Patricia used that grief like a weapon. When she emerged, she patted Robert's cheek like a proud grandmother. Such a nice young man. Very thorough. Madison, dear, you're next. Tell him about your research. Madison practically bounced into the interview room, eager to present her findings to an official audience. She'd brought visual aids, printouts of documents, screenshots of conversations, even a PowerPoint she'd apparently created at 3 a.m. titled, "The Systematic Destruction of Deborah Thompson, a Case Study in Family Fraud." "I started investigating 3 months ago," she began without prompting. "My mom always got weird when I asked about the missing cousin in old photos, said it was complicated and painful. But I'm 17. Everything's complicated and painful. That's not a reason to pretend someone never existed." She walked Robert through her investigation with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found their calling. The postal fraud, the bank records, the pattern of behavior that pointed to deliberate, calculated destruction of a family member's life. "The thing is," Madison said, leaning forward conspiratorially, "I think Deborah's doing amazing somewhere. Like anyone who could survive what Patricia did is probably a superhero now. I hope she's like a billionaire or something laughing at all of us." I nearly choked on my coffee. Emma had to pause the feed while I collected myself. The interviews continued throughout the morning. Each family member entered nervous and emerged shaken. Some, like Jennifer, broke down completely. "I knew something was wrong," she sobbed. "Deborah would never steal. She used to give me her allowance when I forgot my lunch money. But Mom was gone, and Patricia seemed so sure, and Dad believed her. I was a coward. I chose comfort over my sister, and I've regretted it every day since." Others, like Marcus, made excuses wrapped in half apologies. "Look, I was building my business. I didn't have time for family drama. Patricia said Deborah stole money. Dad confirmed it. What was I supposed to do? Launch my own investigation? I had a wife, kids' responsibilities. Maybe I should have asked more questions, but hindsight's 20/20, right?" The extended family revealed a fascinating pattern. Those who'd questioned the narrative had been systematically excluded or discredited. Cousin Robert mentioned how his wedding invitation had mysteriously gotten lost after he'd suggested finding Deborah. Aunt Helen disclosed that Patricia had threatened to reveal her husband's business bankruptcy if she kept stirring up trouble. "She had something on everyone," Helen said quietly. "Financial troubles, health issues, marriage problems. Patricia collected secrets like weapons. If you questioned her about Deborah, suddenly your private business became family gossip. We learned to stay quiet." By noon, only 2 people remained, my father and Patricia. Thomas went first, moving like a man walking to his execution. On the monitor, I watched him sit heavily in the interview chair, his hands shaking as he folded them in his lap. "I killed my daughter," he said without preamble. "Not literally, but I might as well have. She came to me with evidence that Patricia was stealing, and I chose my new wife over my child. What kind of father does that?" Robert maintained his professional composure, but I saw him swallow hard. "Can you elaborate on the evidence she presented?" "Video footage of Patricia taking money from the safe, bank statements showing suspicious transfers. Deborah begged me to look at it to believe her." His voice broke. I told her she was being dramatic, that grief was making her paranoid. I let Patricia convince me that my brilliant, loving daughter was a thief and an addict. "Why?" Robert asked gently. Thomas was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Because I was weak. Because Patricia made my life easy when Sophia's death made it impossible. Because believing Deborah meant admitting I'd married a monster while my wife's body was barely cold. Because I was a coward who chose convenience over truth. He looked directly at the camera then, and I gasped. It was like he could see me through the lens. I know she's out there somewhere, my daughter. I've looked for her hired investigators, but she vanished completely. I want her to know. I want her to know I'm sorry, that I think about her every day, that I destroyed our family by choosing wrong, and I'll spend whatever time I have left trying to atone. When he emerged, he looked somehow lighter despite his tears. The truth, however painful, seemed to have lifted a weight he'd carried for a decade. Finally, it was Patricia's turn. She'd used the morning to attempt repairs. Fresh makeup, different clothes, her armor of perfectionism hastily reconstructed. But her hands shook as she sat, and her voice lacked its usual authority. "This is harassment," she began. "I don't consent to being recorded or interrogated. I want a lawyer." "This isn't a legal proceeding," Robert assured her smoothly. "Simply a security interview regarding discussions of potential criminal activity on the property. Of course, you're free to leave at any time, though checkout isn't until 10 tomorrow, so you'd be forfeiting your deposit." The mention of money made her flinch. Even now exposed and cornered, she couldn't bear the thought of financial loss. "What do you want to know?" she asked grudgingly. "Let's start with the mail fraud allegations," Robert suggested. "Multiple family members have mentioned intercepted letters, false forwarding addresses, identity theft. Can you speak to that?" "I protected this family," Patricia said, her mask cracking. "Deborah was unstable, violent. She attacked me when I confronted her about the missing money. I had bruises for weeks." "Did you file a police report about this alleged attack?" No, I didn't want to ruin her life. I just wanted her to get help." "But you did file multiple harassment complaints after she left, correct? Despite claiming you wanted to protect her." "Sending to me or sensa for." Patricia's jaw tightened. "She was stalking us, sending threatening messages." "The messages that handwriting analysis might prove you wrote yourself." Robert consulted his tablet as if reading official reports rather than my notes. "The ones sent from locations where you were photographed at the exact same times." "You can't prove anything," Patricia whispered. "Actually," Robert said conversationally, "Madison's research is quite thorough. FBI level one might say. But let's discuss your first husband's death. Several family members mentioned concerns about the circumstances." Patricia went white. "That was ruled a heart attack. Natural causes. I don't have to listen to this." She stood to leave, but Robert's next words stopped her cold. "The owner of this property has a particular interest in that case. They've been conducting their own investigation. Amazing what money can uncover. Medical records, insurance documents, witness statements that were never properly investigated 25 years ago." "The owner," Patricia's voice cracked. "Who owns this place who's doing this to me?" "Someone very interested in justice," Robert replied. "Someone who believes the truth always surfaces no matter how deep it's buried. Someone who's been watching, waiting, preparing for this exact moment." Patricia ran, literally bolted from the room, her designer heels clicking frantically on marble as she fled to her suite. Through the cameras, I watched her throwing clothes into suitcases, muttering frantically, making phone calls to lawyers who weren't answering on Sunday afternoon. The rest of the family gathered in the living room processing what they'd witnessed. The interviews had stripped away final pretenses, leaving them with the raw truth of what they'd enabled through action or silence. "She's not coming to dinner," Jennifer said unnecessarily. "Good," Miriam replied. "We have things to discuss without her poison in the air, like what we're going to do when we find Deborah. Because we will find her. This family owes her that much." Madison pulled up her laptop. "I've actually got some leads. There's a tech billionaire who appeared around the time Deborah vanished. Same age, same background in finance, but no photos, very private. Her company just sold for billions. The timeline matches perfectly." My heart stopped. The investigation skills that had exposed Patricia were now turning toward me. I watched my family lean in hope and curiosity, replacing the morning's despair. "What's her name?" Jennifer asked breathlessly. "The records are sealed, but—" Madison grinned. "I've got a friend who's really good with corporate databases. Give me a few hours." As they scattered to prepare for their final dinner at Paradise Cove, I sat back in my hotel chair, mind racing. The security interviews had exceeded every expectation, drawing out truths and confessions I'd never imagined hearing. But now my anonymity was threatened by the very person who'd fought for my vindication. "She's going to find you," Emma said softly. "That girl's like a bloodhound with Wi-Fi. What do you want to do?" I looked at the screens showing my family. Broken, but finally honest, shattered, but beginning to heal. Tomorrow at checkout, they'd learn whose house they'd confessed in. But maybe if Madison's investigation succeeded, they'd learn it tonight. Let her find me, I decided. Let her be the one to solve the mystery. She's earned that right. The final act was approaching faster than planned, but perhaps that was fitting. 10 years of secrets were unraveling in a single weekend, and the girl who'd been erased was about to be discovered by the cousin who refused to let her stay, disappeared. Justice, I was learning, had its own timeline. And sometimes the best revenge wasn't revealing yourself. It was letting others fight to find you, proving once and for all that you mattered enough to be missed. By 5 p.m. on Sunday, the house resembled a war zone of emotional devastation. Through the cameras, I watched alliances crumble and new ones form as the full weight of the morning's confessions settled over my family like ash from a volcanic eruption. Patricia had barricaded herself in the master suite, refusing all attempts at contact. Through the bedroom camera, I could see her pacing, frantically phone, pressed to her ear, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails for attorneys who wouldn't call back until Monday. Her designer luggage lay half-packed on the bedclothes, spilling out like evidence of her unraveling. In the kitchen, Jennifer and Marcus faced off over a bottle of wine that had already been half-emptied. Their childhood dynamic of protective older brother and anxious younger sister had shattered completely. "You knew," Jennifer accused, her voice raw from crying. "You knew Patricia was lying about the bank statements. You work in real estate. You know how to read financial documents. You could have verified Deborah's story in 5 minutes." Marcus slammed his glass down hard enough to crack the stem. "And what destroyed Dad's new marriage, make us all homeless? Patricia controlled everything by then. The house, the account's Dad's entire life. If I'd challenged her, she'd have turned him against me too. So you sacrificed our sister instead," Jennifer said flatly. "You let a 22-year-old girl take the fall so you could keep your comfortable life." "Don't act so noble," Marcus shot back. "You folded just as fast. One threat from Patricia about revealing your husband's affair, and you went silent. We all had our price. Deborah was just the one who paid it." From the family room, Aunt Helen's voice rose above the general chaos. "This is what she wanted. Don't you see Patricia divided us then, and she's dividing us now? We're so busy blaming each other that we're forgetting who orchestrated all of this." But the fractures ran too deep for easy reconciliation. 20 years of suppressed guilt and resentment erupted in accusations that flew like shrapnel. Uncle Richard blamed Thomas for bringing Patricia into their lives. Cousin Robert revealed that Patricia had sabotaged his business loan application after he'd questioned Deborah's exile. Even the teenagers took sides, some defending their parents' impossible choices, while others condemned the entire adult generation as cowards and enablers. Madison alone seemed focused on the future rather than the past. She'd commandeered the dining room table, laptops and phones, spread out like a command center her friend network mobilized in the hunt for their missing cousin. I watched her work with a mixture of pride and panic, knowing it was only a matter of time before her digital bloodhounds caught my scent. "Got something," she announced to anyone listening. "A shell company registered in Delaware 3 years after Deborah disappeared. The formation date matches perfectly with some patent filings for financial technology. And get this, the company's law firm. They specialize in privacy protection for high net worth individuals who've experienced family trauma. My stomach dropped. She was following the breadcrumbs Sandra Kim had tried so hard to hide. The irony was breathtaking. The same determination that had exposed Patricia was now hunting me down. Miriam joined Madison at her improvised investigation center. "Show me everything, dear. My old eyes might catch something yours missed." As they huddled together, the most unlikely alliance in family history, Thomas emerged from his self-imposed isolation in the study. He looked like he'd aged another decade in the past few hours, but his voice carried new determination. "Enough," he said quietly, but the word carried enough authority to silence the bickering. "We're doing exactly what we did 10 years ago, tearing each other apart instead of facing the real problem. Patricia destroyed this family, yes, but we let her. Each of us chose silence over truth, comfort over courage. Fighting among ourselves won't bring Deborah back." "Nothing will bring her back," Jennifer said bitterly. "We threw her away like garbage. Why would she ever forgive us?" "I don't expect forgiveness," Thomas replied, "but I won't stop trying to earn it. Starting with this, I'm divorcing Patricia. I've already called my attorney. She'll be removed from the house by tomorrow, and I'm pressing charges for the fraud Miriam and Madison uncovered." The room went silent. Patricia must have heard through the door because a crash echoed from the master suite, followed by muffled cursing. "It's too late for gestures," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "It's never too late for truth," Miriam interjected. "Sophie used to say that redemption isn't a destination, it's a direction. You turn toward the light and keep walking, even if you never reach it." "Speaking of truth," Madison said, looking up from her screens with electric excitement, "I found her. I found Deborah." The family converged on the dining room like iron filings to a magnet. I gripped my chair arms, heart hammering, as I watched Madison pull up article after article on her main screen. "She's brilliant," Madison breathed. "Like actually brilliant. Founded a company called Equilibrium that democratized AI-powered investing. Sold it for $2.3 billion. She went from nothing, literally nothing, to being one of the youngest self-made billionaires in America." The family stared at the screen in stunned silence. Financial publications had written about the mysterious genius behind Equilibrium, but I'd been careful to avoid photographs, interviews, or public appearances. Still, Madison had connected enough dots to paint a picture. That's impossible," Marcus stammered. "She was 22 when she left. How could she build something like that?" "Because she's a Thompson," Miriam said proudly. "Sophie's granddaughter, my blood. You thought you destroyed her, but you only forged her into something stronger." "There's more." Madison continued scrolling through corporate records. "The acquisition happened just 6 months ago, and look at this. One of the bidders was Meridian Capital, run by Raymond Chen, Patricia's brother." The implications hit the room like a physical force. Patricia's family had tried to buy Deborah's company. The interconnected web of greed and manipulation ran even deeper than they'd imagined. "She fought them off," Madison reported with obvious admiration. "Sold to a Japanese company instead, kept partial ownership and full control. She didn't just survive what you did to her. She conquered an entire industry." Jennifer began crying again, but these tears were different. Pride mixed with devastating regret. "My little sister built $1 billion company while we were pretending she didn't exist." "Wait," Madison said suddenly, fingers flying across her keyboard. "The timeline, the location. Oh my God." She looked up with an expression of stunned realization. "The shell company that bought this house, the renovation timing, the security system that just happened to catch everything we said this weekend." The room went absolutely still. Even the ocean seemed to hold its breath. "She owns this house," Madison whispered. "Deborah owns this house. We're in her house right now. She's been watching everything." The explosion of reactions was immediate and deafening. Some family members ran to windows as if they might spot me. Others stared at corners, suddenly conscious of the cameras they'd ignored all weekend. Patricia's scream from the master suite could probably be heard in Santa Barbara. But it was Thomas's reaction that broke my heart. He walked slowly to the center of the room, looking up at where he correctly guessed a camera would be, and spoke directly to me. "Deborah, if you're watching, I'm sorry. I'm so deeply, desperately sorry. I failed you as a father. I chose convenience over truth, a predator over my own daughter. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But please know that not a day has passed that I haven't regretted my choice. You were the best of us, and we threw you away for nothing, for lies, for comfort, for cowardice." He broke down completely, then the kind of raw, ugly crying that men of his generation usually died before displaying. Jennifer and Marcus flanked him, their own tears falling as the magnitude of their location sank in. "This is why she brought us here," Helen said wonderingly. "To face ourselves, to confess without the ability to hide or pretend. She gave us the rope to hang ourselves with truth." "No," Miriam corrected firmly. "She gave you the chance to finally be honest, to admit what you did, to begin making amends if that's even possible. Don't you see she could have destroyed you all, sent the recordings to newspapers, posted them online, ruined your reputations forever? Instead, she let you speak your truth privately among family." "But she's not family anymore," Marcus said hollowly. "We made sure of that." "Family isn't just blood," Madison said fiercely. "It's choice, and you all chose wrong. But Deborah, she chose to build something beautiful from your ugliness. She chose to become extraordinary despite your ordinary cruelty. And she chose to let you confess here in the place that meant everything to all of us instead of in a courtroom or newspaper expose." The sound of shattering glass interrupted the moment. Patricia had thrown a vase against her door, her control finally completely broken. But nobody moved to comfort her. Her reign of terror was over-ended by the very person she'd tried to erase. As the sun began its descent toward the Pacific painting, the sky in shades of reckoning, my family sat with the full weight of their choices. They were in my house, surrounded by my success, confronted by their failure. Some wept. Some stared into space. Some, like Madison, continued searching for any clue about where I might be watching from. "Tomorrow morning." Robert's voice came through the intercom, making everyone jump. "Checkout is at 10 a.m. The owner has requested that Mrs. Patricia Thompson leave the property immediately. Security will escort her out within the hour. The rest of you are welcome to stay until morning to process recent revelations." "Will she be there?" Thomas asked desperately. "At checkout, will Deborah come?" Robert's pause was perfectly theatrical. "The owner's plans are their own to reveal. But I've been asked to tell you this. Every moment of this weekend has been recorded. Every confession, every truth, every tear. What happens with those recordings depends entirely on what you do next." The implications were clear. I held their secrets, their admissions of guilt, their tears of regret. But more than that, I held their future in my hands. The same hands they'd tried to cut off 10 years ago. As Patricia was escorted out, screaming threats and denials that nobody listened to anymore, the family faced their first night of real truth in a decade. They huddled together, not in celebration, but in shared culpability, finally united by honesty instead of lies. Madison caught my attention one last time before I closed the laptop for the evening. She'd turned to a camera, speaking as if we were having a conversation. "I know you're watching, Cousin Deborah, and I want you to know I'm proud of you. Proud that you survived. Proud that you thrived. Proud that you're giving them a chance to face themselves. I hope someday you'll give me a chance to know you. The real you, not the ghost story they created. Because I think you might be the most badass woman in our entire messed up family, and I'd really like to learn from you." Her words followed me as I prepared for tomorrow's final act. The family fracture was complete, but from the broken pieces, something new might grow, something honest, something real. Whether I'd be part of that new family remained to be seen, but for the first time in 10 years, it felt like a possibility worth considering. The truth had set them free from Patricia's lies. Tomorrow, we'd learn if it could also free us from the past that had divided us. Monday, August 18th, 10 a.m. I stood in the marble-floored foyer of my Malibu estate, my heart a percussion section playing a symphony of anticipation and terror. Emma waited beside me, her presence a steady anchor in the storm of emotions, threatening to capsize my carefully maintained control. We'd arrived at 9:30, entering through the private entrance to avoid early encounters. "You don't have to do this face-to-face," Emma reminded me softly. "You could reveal yourself through Robert, through lawyers, through video screens. You've already won." "No," I said, adjusting the collar of my simple but impeccably tailored black suit. "They need to see me. I need to see them. 10 years of hiding ends today." Through the security monitors in the foyer, I watched my family's final morning in my house. They moved like survivors of a shipwreck, gathering their belongings with mechanical movements. Some had clearly not slept. Madison was still at her laptop. Jennifer's eyes were swollen from crying, and Thomas sat in the study staring at photo albums as if they might rewrite history. Patricia was gone, escorted out the previous evening in a scene that would have been comedic if it weren't so pathetic. She'd threatened lawsuits, police reports, and media exposure before Robert calmly reminded her that every threat was being recorded and would be admissible in her upcoming fraud trial. Her final words screamed from the back of her departing Uber were, "She planned all this. Deborah's insane. She's dangerous." For once, Patricia was almost right. I had planned this. Every detail, every revelation, every moment leading to this final confrontation. Whether that made me insane or dangerous was a judgment I'd leave to others. "They're gathering," Emma reported, watching the main monitor. "Robert's directing them to the grand living room for checkout procedures." I took a deep breath, tasting salt air and possibility. 10 years ago, I'd left this house as a broken girl accused of crimes I hadn't committed. Today, I'd face my accusers as the woman their betrayal had created, successful beyond their comprehension, wealthy beyond their dreams, and holding their secrets in my manicured hands. "It's time," I said. We walked through hallways I'd filled with hidden cameras, past rooms that had captured confessions, and tears toward the family that had tried to erase me. The click of my heels on marble counted down the seconds to impact. I heard their voices before I saw them, nervous chatter, speculation about whether I'd actually appear, arguments about what to say if I did. Madison's voice rose above the rest. "Everyone just needs to be honest. No more lies, no more excuses. We tell her the truth and accept whatever comes next." "What if she wants revenge?" Marcus asked nervously. "She has recordings of everything. She could destroy our lives." "Then we'd deserve it." Miriam's voice cut through like steel. "But I don't think that's what Deborah wants. A person seeking simple revenge doesn't create this elaborate unveiling of truth. She wants something more." I paused at the doorway, taking one last moment to prepare. Then I stepped into view. The silence was absolute. 42 faces turned toward me with expressions ranging from shock to recognition to shame. Some, like the younger cousins, clearly didn't recognize me. The broken 22-year-old they'd last seen had been replaced by a 32-year-old woman who radiated the quiet power that comes from building an empire from nothing. "Hello, family," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the space. "Welcome to my home." Thomas made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Jennifer gripped the nearest chair for support. Marcus stared as if I were a ghost made flesh, which in a way I was. The ghost of their conscience finally materialized. Madison broke the tableau first, of course. "Holy shit, you look exactly like your photos, but also completely different. Like someone leveled up your entire existence. I mean that as a compliment." Despite everything, I felt my lips twitch toward a smile. "Thank you, Madison. Your investigation skills are impressive. If you ever want a job in corporate intelligence, call me." "Deborah." Thomas stepped forward, then stopped as if hitting an invisible wall. "You're here. You're really here." "I've been here all weekend." I replied evenly, watching, listening, learning who my family became in my absence, or perhaps learning who you always were. Jennifer burst into tears. We're sorry. We're so sorry. I know that means nothing after what we did, but stop. I held up a hand. I didn't reveal myself for apologies. Those are words, and I've heard enough words. I'm here to discuss actions. I moved further into the room, Emma shadowing me protectively. Robert stood by the fireplace, no longer the obsequious concierge, but clearly security his posture, suggesting military training. The power dynamic had shifted entirely. This was my territory, my rules. Let's start with facts, I continued. Patricia Thompson systematically destroyed my life with your help. Each of you made choices that enabled her campaign. You believed lies without investigation. You chose comfort over truth. You let a young woman who'd just lost her mother disappear rather than risk your own positions. We know, Helen said quietly. We've spent the weekend facing that. The question is, what happens now? I pulled out a sleek tablet, its screen showing thumbnails of recorded conversations. What happens now depends on you. I have enough evidence here to destroy Patricia legally. Fraud, theft, mail, tampering, conspiracy. She'll spend her remaining years in prison if I choose to pursue it. Do it, Marcus said immediately. She deserves everything coming to her. Easy for you to say now, I observed. Where was this righteousness 10 years ago when it mattered? He flinched as if slapped. I was weak, selfish, wrong, but I'm trying to be better now. Trying? I repeated, tasting the word. An interesting choice. You're all trying now that the truth is undeniable. But what about when it was hard? When standing up for me meant risking something? There's no excuse, Thomas said, his voice rough with emotion. I failed you in every way a father could fail a daughter. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But if there's any way to make amends, any action that could begin to repair the damage, tell me, and I'll do it. I studied him. This man who'd chosen a predator over his own child. The decade had aged him, but more than that, it had hollowed him. The recording showed he'd been carrying his guilt, but seeing it etched on his face was different. Madison, I said, turning to my young cousin, you did something none of them could do. You questioned the narrative. You investigated. You fought for truth despite pressure to stop. Why? She shrugged with teenage nonchalance that didn't quite hide her intensity. It didn't make sense. The story they told about you, evil drug addict thief. But then all these weird details that didn't fit. Returned mail, no police reports, no evidence except Patricia's word. I've watched enough true crime to know that when stories don't make sense, someone's lying. And if they'd threatened you, I pressed. If Patricia had leverage over you like she did the others, Madison's chin lifted. Then I'd have burned it all down. Some things are more important than comfort. Family's supposed to mean something. Truth's supposed to matter. Yes, I said softly. It is. I turned to address the room at large. Here's what's going to happen. Patricia will face justice. I've already sent the evidence to the authorities. The FBI will be arresting her within days for mail fraud and identity theft. The investigation into her first husband's death will be reopened. She'll never manipulate another family again. Good, Miriam said with savage satisfaction. Sophie would dance on her grave. As for the rest of you, I continued, you have a choice. The recordings from this weekend will remain private if, and only if, you meet my conditions. The room tensed. Here was the revenge they'd feared, the pound of flesh I'd demand for their betrayal. First, I said, full financial restitution. Not to me. I've built more wealth than this entire family combined, but to causes that matter. Each of you will donate to organizations supporting family fraud, victims equal to whatever you gained from my absence. The inheritance portions that went to you instead of me, the family business opportunities I was excluded from, all of it goes to help others. Done, Jennifer said immediately. Whatever the amount, Second, I continued public acknowledgement, not of my success, I don't need your validation, but of what you did. Each of you will write a statement admitting your role in believing and spreading Patricia's lies. These won't be published, but they'll exist. The truth finally documented. Marcus nodded slowly. We owe you that. We owe the truth that much. Third, I said, my voice softening slightly, therapy. Real therapy, not the performative kind Patricia suggested to make you feel better about abandoning me. You'll work with specialists in family trauma and manipulation. You'll learn how someone like Patricia could turn you against your own blood, because if you don't understand how it happened, you'll let it happen again. All reasonable, Thomas said eagerly. More than reasonable. Is there a fourth condition? I looked at him, this broken man who'd been my hero before becoming my betrayer. The fourth isn't a condition, it's an opportunity. I'm starting a foundation, the Sophie Thompson Foundation for Family Justice. It will help families torn apart by manipulation and lies. I'm putting in $100 million. If you want to be part of it, if you want to honor my mother's memory by preventing what happened to us from happening to others, you're welcome to join me. The room erupted in eager agreements, promises of involvement, pledges of commitment. But I held up my hand again. Not now, I said firmly. You don't get to jump from betrayal to redemption in a single weekend. You'll do the work first, the restitution, the acknowledgments, the therapy. In a year, if you've shown genuine change, we'll discuss the foundation. This isn't a quick fix. It's a long road back to anything resembling trust. What about us? Madison asked. The cousins who were kids when this happened. We didn't betray you. We didn't even know you existed until recently. I smiled genuinely for the first time. You're welcome in my life whenever you choose. You didn't create this situation, and you've shown more courage in uncovering it than the adults showed in a decade. My door is open to you. What about me? Miriam asked, though her eyes suggested she already knew the answer. You never stopped believing in me, I said, emotion finally creeping into my voice. You fought when everyone else folded. You're not just welcome, you're family, the real kind based on loyalty and truth. I looked around the room one last time at these people who'd shaped my life through their cruelty and cowardice. They looked smaller than my memories, diminished by their choices, but also somehow more human. The monsters of my nightmares had become flawed, weak people who'd chosen wrong when tested. This house, I said, gesturing to the walls that had witnessed so much, will no longer host Thompson family reunions. That tradition died with your betrayal. But maybe if you do the work, if you prove that people can change, we might build new traditions, based on truth instead of lies, courage instead of comfort. I turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. The recipes in the kitchen, the photo albums in the study, the games in the closet, take them. They belong to the family we used to be. Maybe they'll remind you of what we lost when you chose Patricia over me. Emma and I walked toward the door, my family frozen behind us like a tableau of regret. But Thomas's voice stopped me at the threshold. Deborah. He called, tears streaming down his face. Can you ever forgive us? Not now, I know, but someday is it even possible? I turned back, meeting the eyes of the man who'd been my father before becoming my judge and jury. I don't know, I said honestly. Forgiveness isn't mine to give or withhold yet. I'm still becoming whoever I'll be after what you did to me. Ask me in a year after you've done the work, after you've proven change is possible, after I've had time to heal from wounds you pretended didn't exist. That's more than we deserve, he whispered. Yes, I agreed. It is. I left them then, walking out of my house and into the morning sun. Behind me, I left a family shattered by truth, but possibly, just possibly, ready to rebuild on stronger foundations. Ahead lay my own future, no longer defined by their betrayal, but informed by it, strengthened by it, transformed by it. How do you feel? Emma asked as we reached my car. I considered the question testing my emotional state, like probing a healing wound. Free, I said finally. For the first time in 10 years, I feel free. The grand reveal was over. I'd shown them who their cruelty had created, given them a path toward redemption, and set boundaries that protected my hard-won peace. Whether they'd walk that path remained to be seen, but it was no longer my responsibility to guide them. I was Deborah Thompson, daughter, sister, cousin billionaire, survivor. I was all of these things, and none of them. I was whoever I chose to be next, unencumbered by their lies or my need for their truth. As we drove away from Paradise Cove, I didn't look back. The past had been confronted. The future waited bright with possibility and free from the shadows of family who'd tried to erase me, but had only succeeded in forging me into something unbreakable. The ghost of Deborah Thompson was finally laid to rest. In her place stood a woman who'd learned that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's becoming someone they could never have imagined, then giving them the chance to earn a place in your extraordinary life. Whether they'd earn it was their story to write. Mine had already moved on to better chapters. 6 weeks had passed since the Paradise Cove confrontation, and autumn was painting Los Angeles in subtle shades of change. I sat in my downtown office, not Equilibrium's old headquarters, but the new space I'd claimed for the Sophie Thompson Foundation. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a city of millions each, with their own stories of family betrayal and redemption. The morning news played silently on a wall-mounted screen showing Patricia being led into federal court in handcuffs. Her designer suit couldn't hide the orange jumpsuit underneath, and her perfectly styled hair couldn't distract from the defeat in her eyes. The FBI had been thorough. Mail fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, elder financial abuse. The investigation into her first husband's death had been reopened after new evidence surfaced. She was facing 40 years minimum. The reporters are calling it the Mansion Confession Case, Emma said, entering with coffee and a stack of documents. Apparently, the fact that she was caught by hidden cameras in a Malibu estate has captured public imagination. I'd kept my name out of the media, but the story was too sensational to contain entirely. A stepmother who systematically destroyed her stepdaughter's life, only to be exposed during a family reunion at the victim's secretly owned mansion. It had all the elements of a primetime drama. My phone buzzed with a scheduled reminder, Jennifer Thompson, 2 p.m. therapy report. The conditions I'd set were being met with varying degrees of compliance and success. I opened the secure folder containing the family's progress reports. Jennifer had thrown herself into therapy with the fervor of someone desperate for absolution. Her therapist noted significant breakthroughs in understanding how her conflict avoidance had enabled Patricia's abuse. The financial restitution had been paid in full, $200,000 donated to the National Center for Victims of Crime. Her written acknowledgement was 12 pages of raw honesty about her cowardice and its cost. Marcus was struggling more. His therapist reported resistance to accepting full responsibility, a tendency to minimize his role as passive rather than actively harmful. He'd paid his restitution, but seemed to view it as a transaction that should buy immediate forgiveness. His written statement read more like a legal document than a genuine acknowledgement. Thomas had surprised everyone, including himself. At 72, he'd entered intensive therapy with the dedication of someone who knew they were running out of time to make things right. He'd liquidated assets to donate $5 million to various family justice organizations. His acknowledgement letter arrived weekly. He kept rewriting it, each version diving deeper into his failures as a father and husband. The extended family showed predictable variation. Some, like Aunt Helen, had embraced the chance for redemption. Others had met minimum requirements while clearly resenting the imposition. The cousins who'd been children during my exile were the most genuine in their efforts to understand and atone for their passive complicity. But it was Madison who continued to astound. She'd started a podcast called Family Secrets: The Stories We Don't Tell, focusing on family manipulation and the path to healing. Her first season, drawing carefully anonymized lessons from our family's experience, had already helped dozens of listeners recognize toxic patterns in their own lives. She donated her entire college savings to the foundation and was working part-time to rebuild it. "I have an appointment," I told Emma, gathering my things. "Madison's coming by to discuss her foundation internship proposal." "You're really going to let her in?" Emma asked carefully. "She's brilliant, but she's also family. Complicated family." "She's earned it," I said simply. "Besides, someone needs to carry on Sophie Thompson's legacy of asking uncomfortable questions. Madison's proven she has the stomach for it." An hour later, Madison burst into my office with her characteristic energy laptop bag swinging and eyes bright with purpose. She traded her summer rebellion aesthetic for young professional, but the sharp intelligence remained undimmed. "I've mapped out a whole program," she announced without preamble, spreading documents across my desk. "Outreach to families showing signs of manipulation, educational resources about financial abuse, a hotline staffed by survivors. And look, I've already got partnership interest from 3 universities for research programs." I reviewed her proposals, impressed despite myself. She'd clearly inherited the Thompson business acumen that Patricia had tried to steal exclusively for herself. "This is ambitious," I noted. "It would require significant resources and someone willing to work 60-hour weeks for modest nonprofit pay." "I'm not in it for the money," Madison said firmly. "I'm in it because what happened to you happens to thousands of people every day. They just don't usually have the resources to build billion-dollar companies and buy revenge houses. They need advocates. They need hope. They need proof that survival is possible. And you think you can provide that?" She met my eyes directly. "I think we can provide that. You've got the resources and the lived experience. I've got the energy and the platform. Together, we could save families from what ours went through." I leaned back, studying this remarkable young woman who'd refused to accept comfortable lies. "You know, working with me means working with someone your family abandoned. Some of them still resent my conditions. It could get complicated." "Family's already complicated," Madison shrugged. "At least this kind of complicated comes with purpose. Besides, someone needs to document the foundation's work, and I'm already the family historian of uncomfortable truths." I made my decision. "Internship starts Monday. Expect long hours, difficult cases, and the occasional family member trying to use you as a go-between." "Already happening," she grinned. "Dad keeps asking if you've mentioned him. Mom wants to know if you've read her latest acknowledgement letter. Even Miriam's been probing for information about your emotional state." "And what do you tell them?" "The truth," Madison said simply, "that you're building something more important than family reconciliation. You're building prevention. You're making sure other Deborahs don't disappear into exile because their families choose comfort over truth." After she left, I stood at my window watching the city pulse with life. Each light represented a family, and statistics suggested too many harbored their own Patricias, their own complicit enablers, their own exiled truth-tellers. My phone rang, Thomas's weekly call. I'd started answering them 3 weeks ago, though our conversations remained carefully bounded. "Deborah." His voice was tentative, as if I might hang up at any moment. "I wanted you to know, the divorce is final. Patricia got nothing. The judge was unsympathetic to her situation." "I know," I said. "I've been monitoring the legal proceedings." "Of course you have." A pause. "I've been thinking about your mother lately, about what she'd think of all this. I think she'd be proud of what you've built. Not just the money, but the foundation. The chance for redemption you've offered, even when we deserve none." "Mom believed in second chances," I acknowledged. "But she also believed in consequences. Patricia's facing hers. You're all facing yours. What matters is what you do next." "I want to do more," he said urgently. "The donations, the therapy, the acknowledgments, they feel insufficient. I stole 10 years from you. How do I give that back?" "You can't," I said flatly. Time doesn't work that way, but you can make sure the next 10 years are different. You can support the foundation's work. You can speak publicly about how manipulation happens in good families. You can be the father to others that you failed to be to me. Would you... He started again. Would you ever consider having dinner, not as father and daughter? I know I destroyed that, but as two people working toward the same goal, I considered it. The anger that had burned for a decade had cooled to something more useful, determination to prevent others' suffering. And perhaps there was room not for the relationship we'd lost, but for something new, something built on truth rather than assumption. Maybe, I said finally, ask me again in 6 months, after the Foundation's first major initiative launches, after you've proven this isn't just about earning forgiveness, but about genuine change. That's more than I dared hope, he said quietly. Thank you. After ending the call, I returned to the Foundation's work. Grant proposals to review partnerships to establish survivors to support. The empire I'd built from exile was being transformed into a shield for others facing similar betrayal. Patricia would spend her remaining years in prison, but her true punishment was seeing her victim thrive beyond her wildest fears. Every news story about the Foundation's work, every family saved from manipulation, every truth told instead of buried, all of it stood as testament to her failure to destroy me. The reckoning was ongoing not just for my family, but for all families harboring toxic secrets. Some would embrace the painful path to truth. Others would cling to comfortable lies until those lies consumed them. But now there were resources examples and hope for those brave enough to choose differently. I thought of Sophie Thompson, my mother, who'd seen through Patricia, too late to save herself, but had planted seeds of truth that eventually bloomed. The foundation bearing her name would be her true memorial, not a gravestone marking where she died, but a living testament to the values she'd tried to instill. Ready for the board meeting? Emma asked, returning with a fresh stack of files. The Survivors Advocacy Group wants to discuss expanding the emergency housing program. Ready, I confirmed, gathering my materials. As we walked to the conference room, I caught my reflection in polished steel elevator doors. The woman staring back bore little resemblance to the 22-year-old who'd fled Paradise Cove in tears. That girl had been destroyed. This woman had been forged in the fire of that destruction, emerging stronger, sharper, and dedicated to ensuring no one else faced that flame alone. The reckoning continued rippling outward from my family to touch lives we'd never know. Patricia had taught me that one person's cruelty could destroy a life, but she'd also inadvertently taught me that one person's determination could save thousands. As I entered the conference room full of advocates and survivors, I smiled. Patricia thought she'd won when she drove me into exile. She had no idea she was creating her own worst nightmare. A victim who refused to stay, victimized a ghost who came back stronger than the living a discarded daughter who built an empire from the ashes of betrayal. The reckoning wasn't revenge. It was revolution, and it had only just begun. The November rain drummed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Foundation's conference room, where I'd gathered those family members who'd completed 6 months of the required work. Not everyone had been invited. Marcus had dropped out of therapy after 3 months, claiming the demands of his failing real estate business made continuation impossible. Several cousins had paid their restitution but shown no genuine growth. They weren't ready for this conversation. Those present had earned their seats through consistent action. Thomas, Jennifer, Aunt Helen, and surprisingly Uncle Richard, who'd undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation. The younger generation was represented by Madison, who'd become integral to the Foundation's work, and 3 cousins who'd shown genuine commitment to understanding how they'd been complicit through silence. Thank you for coming. I began standing at the head of the table where Patricia had once held court over family meetings. 6 months ago, I gave you conditions for remaining in my life. Today, we discuss what comes next. The tablets in front of each person displayed their progress reports, therapy summaries, restitution confirmations, and most importantly, the personal acknowledgement letters they'd written. Some, like Jennifer's, had evolved through multiple drafts into genuine explorations of accountability. Others remained surface-level meeting requirements without embracing their spirit. Before we continue, I said, I need to share something Patricia revealed during her confession. She claimed I knew something about her past that made me a threat. I've spent months investigating what she meant. I clicked a remote and the wall screen displayed a series of documents. Patricia's first husband, Martin Chen, died of a heart attack at age 35. No history of cardiac problems. Patricia was the sole beneficiary of a $2 million life insurance policy purchased just 6 months before his death. The room tensed as I continued. My mother, in her final weeks, asked me to look into Patricia's background. She'd noticed inconsistencies in stories about Martin's death. I just started researching when Mom died, and then Patricia struck first with her accusations. She destroyed me not because of what I'd found, but because of what she feared I might find. Dear God, Helen whispered, she killed him. The case has been reopened based on new evidence. I confirmed. A witness has come forward who saw Patricia purchasing the exact medication that, when combined with Martin's prescribed blood pressure medicine, could trigger a fatal cardiac event. It's circumstantial, but compelling. Thomas's face had gone gray. I married a murderer, brought a murderer into our family, chose her over my own daughter. You chose blindness over discomfort, I corrected, which brings us to why we're here. I've decided to offer selective forgiveness, not blanket absolution, but specific recognition of growth and change. I turned first to Helen. You were the first to question Patricia's narrative even when threatened. You tried to investigate, tried to reach me. Fear silenced you, but conscience never died. I forgive you. Helen burst into tears, reaching across the table. I let her take my hand briefly, the first physical contact I'd allowed with any family member since the reveal. Richard. I continued, turning to my uncle. Your transformation has been remarkable, from pompous enabler to genuine advocate for family abuse survivors. Your work with male survivors of family manipulation has opened important conversations. I forgive you. Richard nodded, his own eyes wet. The meditation teaching facade had crumbled, entirely replaced by someone who'd found actual wisdom through confronting his failures. Jennifer. My sister straightened, hope and fear warring on her face. Your journey has been painful to watch. Confronting your conflict avoidance, understanding how your passivity enabled abuse, that takes courage. But you've done the work consistently and genuinely. I forgive you. Jennifer sobbed openly, mascara streaming. I don't deserve it. I should have protected you. I was older. I should have. Should have is the past, I interrupted. What you do now is what matters. I paused before addressing Thomas. My father had aged dramatically in 6 months, but somehow looked more solid, as if truth had replaced the rot at his core. Thomas, I said, unable to call him Dad yet, your work has been the most extensive. Financial restitution beyond requirements. Public speeches about how good fathers can fail their children. The survivor support group you started for parents who enabled abuse. You've faced your failures without excuses. He waited, hands folded, accepting whatever judgment came. I'm not ready to forgive you completely, I said honestly. The wound you inflicted was the deepest. A father's betrayal hits differently than others. But I acknowledge your genuine transformation. I'm willing to work toward forgiveness in time. That's more grace than I deserve, he said quietly. I'll keep earning it. I turned to the younger generation. You were children manipulated by adults who should have protected truth. There's nothing to forgive, but I'm proud of how you've responded to learning the truth. Madison especially has become a force for justice that would make Sophie Thompson proud. Madison beamed, then quickly sobered. What about the others? Marcus, the cousins who dropped out. They've made their choice, I said firmly. The door isn't permanently closed, but it's no longer open. If they want to reconnect, they'll need to start from the beginning, and I'll be much less patient with second chances. Now, why? I continued pulling up new documents on the tablets. Let's discuss the future. The Foundation has identified 3 major initiatives for the coming year. I want family involvement, but only from those who've proven their commitment. What followed was the first real family meeting we'd had in over a decade, not about maintaining lies or managing Patricia's manipulations, but about building something meaningful. Helen's experience in nonprofit management, Richard's connections to therapeutic communities, Jennifer's educational background, all could serve the Foundation's mission. There's one more thing, I said, as the meeting wound down. Next month is the anniversary of Mom's death. I'll be visiting her grave for the first time since Patricia barred me from the funeral. Those who've earned forgiveness are welcome to join me. It won't be easy, but it might be healing. What about Miriam? Jennifer asked. She's been asking when she can see you again. I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd shared with family in this room. Miriam has standing invitation to my life. She never needed forgiveness because she never needed to earn it. She stood for truth when it cost her, and that's worth more than 1,000 apologies. As the meeting ended, family members lingered reluctant to leave this new dynamic we'd begun building. There were no hugs, no dramatic reconciliations. The wounds were too deep for that, but there were handshakes, genuine thanks, and something that might grow into trust given time and consistent action. Madison stayed behind as others filed out. "You know what I realized," she said, organizing her notes. Patricia tried to destroy one family member, but she actually destroyed the whole family. The lies poisoned everything, made every relationship fake. What you're doing, it's not just forgiving individuals. You're building a completely new family based on truth. The family we should have been, I agreed, if we'd been strong enough to reject her poison from the start. Maybe, Madison said thoughtfully, but maybe this family, the one forged in truth and accountability, will be stronger than the original ever could have been. No more comfortable lies, no more enabling silence, just truth even when it hurts. That night, I returned to Paradise Cove alone. The house stood empty now, the cameras removed the staged perfection, replaced by genuine emptiness. I walked through rooms that had witnessed both my childhood joy and my adult triumph, feeling the weight of both. In the study, I found the photo album Thomas had left behind. Whether by accident or design, I wasn't sure. It chronicled our last summer as a complete family before Mom's diagnosis, before Patricia's arrival, before truth became negotiable. There was 12-year-old me, gap-toothed and grinning, surrounded by family who'd eventually abandoned me. But there was also Mom, radiant and healthy, her arm around me as we built sandcastles. That love was real, even if the family it existed within proved fragile. I took the album with me, not as a relic of pain, but as a reminder that good things could exist within flawed structures. The family in those photos was gone, but some of its members were finding their way to something better. As I drove away from Paradise Cove for the last time, the house would be donated to the Foundation as a retreat center for families healing from manipulation. I thought about forgiveness. It wasn't the blanket absolution they'd hoped for, or the total rejection they'd feared. It was specific, earned, and conditional on continued growth. Some had risen to the challenge, others had fallen away, but those who remained were building something new on the ashes of what Patricia had burned. Not a restoration of the old family, but an evolution into something more conscious, more honest, more worthy of the legacy Sophie Thompson had tried to leave. The selective forgiveness was complete. What grew from it would depend on daily choices to prioritize truth over comfort, accountability over ease. I'd given them the tools and the chance. Whether they'd build something worthy of full reconciliation remained to be seen. But for the first time in a decade, it felt possible. And possibility, I'd learned, was the first step toward healing. February brought unexpected warmth to Southern California, and with it an invitation I'd been both dreading and anticipating. Thomas had called the night before, his voice carefully neutral. "Deborah, I know this might be presumptuous, but we're having a gathering. Not a reunion. We know those days are gone. Just a meal. The ones who've done the work. Miriam's insisting on cooking, and she threatened to show up at your office with soup if you don't come." I'd laughed despite myself. Miriam's chicken soup had been legendary in our family, and she wielded it like emotional warfare. Now I stood outside Thomas's house, my childhood home, for the first time in over a decade. The prosecutor in Patricia's case had released it from evidence, and Thomas had spent months removing every trace of her presence. Still, my hand hesitated on the doorbell. "You can do this," Emma said beside me. She'd insisted on coming as moral support, though she'd wait in the car unless needed. "They're not the same people who betrayed you." "Neither am I," I replied and pressed the bell. Jennifer answered, her face lighting up with nervous joy. "You came. We weren't sure. I mean, we hoped, but—" "Miriam threatened soup delivery," I said. I took it seriously. The house felt different. Patricia's ostentatious additions had been removed, revealing the bones of the home Mom had loved. Family photos had been restored to walls, including ones of me that Patricia had banished. The dining room table, the site of my accusation in exile, had been replaced entirely. "We couldn't keep it," Thomas explained, noticing my gaze. "Too much poison soaked into the wood." The gathering was intentionally small. Besides Thomas and Jennifer, there were Miriam, Helen, Richard Madison, and 2 cousins who'd proven their commitment to change. No plus ones, no performers, no audience, just family trying to rebuild connection. "Before we eat," Miriam announced, commandeering the room with her matriarchal authority, "we acknowledge the empty chairs. Sophie, who should be here, the family members who chose comfort over growth, and the decade we lost to lies." It was a moment of surprising power, acknowledging absence before celebrating presence. We stood in silence, each processing private regrets and public failures. Then Miriam clapped her hands. "Enough mourning. Tonight we feast on truth and brisket. Both are tender when prepared properly." The meal began awkwardly, conversation stilted and careful. Everyone seemed afraid of saying the wrong thing, triggering old wounds, or presuming too much familiarity. It was Madison who broke the ice. "So Deborah, I've been dying to know, how did you go from homeless to billionaire? Like, what was the first breakthrough? Because that's movie material right there." "Madison," Jennifer hissed, "that's not appropriate." "It's fine," I interrupted. "Actually, it's refreshing. Everyone's been dancing around my success like it's shameful to acknowledge. Yes, I built a billion-dollar company from nothing. Yes, I did it while you all thought I was a drug-addicted thief. And yes, I'm proud of it." "Tell us," Richard urged, "not to pry but to understand. How does someone go from exile to empire?" So I told them. The 18-hour days learning to code, Emma investing her life savings, the algorithm that started as revenge against a system that locked out the vulnerable, the VCs who tried to steal it, Patricia's brother among them, the choice to sell to someone who understood vision over profit. The irony, I concluded, is that Patricia's cruelty gave me the drive to succeed. Every rejection letter, every night hungry, every reminder that my family had thrown me away, it all became fuel. She created her worst nightmare, a victim who refused to remain one. "That's what I've been learning in therapy," Thomas said quietly, "how abusers create the very thing they fear. Patricia was terrified of being exposed, so she destroyed anyone who might expose her. But destruction just scattered seeds she couldn't control." "Speaking of seeds," Miriam interjected, "who wants to hear embarrassing childhood stories about Deborah? I have albums." "Miriam, no," I protested, but I was laughing. She produced photo albums I'd never seen, filled with pictures from before my memories began. Baby Deborah covered in spaghetti, toddler Deborah escaping diaper-clad into the garden, young Deborah organizing her stuffed animals into investment portfolios at age 6. "She always had a mind for business," Miriam narrated, "charged me interest on birthday money I held for safekeeping. Sophie was mortified, but I was impressed. The stories flowed easier after that. Jennifer shared memories of me defending her from school bullies despite being younger and smaller. Helen recalled how I'd helped organize fundraisers for her cat rescue, displaying strategic thinking at 10 that adults had missed. "You were always special," Richard said. We let someone convince us that special was dangerous." As dinner wound down, Thomas cleared his throat. "There's something else. Deborah, I've been working with the lawyers. Your mother left you specific items in her will. Things Patricia hid or claimed were lost. I've recovered them." He produced a leather box I recognized immediately. Mom's jewelry, the pieces she'd promised, would be mine. Her engagement ring, her mother's pearls, the watch her father gave her when she graduated medical school. Patricia had claimed they were stolen in a break-in that never happened. "There's more in storage," Thomas continued. "Her medical books, her awards, personal items Patricia said were too painful to keep. They're yours whenever you want them." I touched the pearls gently, remembering Mom wearing them to every important event. "Thank you. I thought these were gone forever." "Patricia stole so much," Jennifer said. "Not just things, but moments, memories, the chance to grieve together." "But she failed at the most important theft," Miriam declared. "She tried to steal Deborah's future, and look how that turned out. She tried to steal our family's capacity for truth, but here we are speaking it. She tried to steal Sophie's legacy, but the foundation ensures it lives on." To Sophie, Helen raised her glass, who raised a daughter strong enough to survive us all. To Sophie, we echoed, and for a moment I felt her presence. Not ghostly or mystical, but in the values she'd instilled that had survived every attempt to corrupt them. The evening progressed with less weight and more warmth. Madison livestreamed parts to her followers with permission, showing that family healing was possible, but not pretty or quick. The younger cousins asked about internships at the foundation. Plans were made for future gatherings, small, intentional, truth-based. As I prepared to leave, Thomas walked me to the door. "I know this doesn't fix everything. One dinner can't repair 10 years, but I hope it's a start." "It is," I assured him. "Not a return to what was, that's gone. But maybe the beginning of something better, something chosen rather than assumed." Jennifer hugged me at the door, the first embrace I'd allowed from her since exile. "I love you," she whispered. "I've always loved you. I just loved my comfort more, and I'll regret that forever." "Regret is only useful if it changes behavior," I replied. "You're changing. That matters more than perpetual self-flagellation." Miriam insisted on sending me home with enough food for a week and threats to check that I ate it. "You're still too skinny. Billionaires need to eat too." As Emma drove us away, I sat quietly processing the evening. It hadn't been the reunion Patricia had forbidden me from attending. It was something rarer, a gathering of people who'd faced their failures and chosen growth over comfort. "How do you feel?" Emma asked. "Hopeful," I said, surprising myself. "Not naive hope. I know who they are and what they're capable of. But hope that people can change, that families can evolve, that truth can triumph over convenient lies." "That's the real victory," Emma observed. "Not the money or the revenge, but proving that healing is possible." My phone buzzed with messages from family members thanking me for coming, sharing photos from dinner, making tentative plans. Each text was a small bridge across the chasm Patricia had created. Later that night, I sat in my home office surrounded by success Patricia never imagined possible. On my desk sat 3 items the AI algorithm that had built my fortune, the foundation papers ensuring Mom's legacy, and now her pearls, recovered from the woman who'd tried to steal everything. The true reunion wasn't about returning to the past, but creating a future where truth mattered more than comfort, where accountability preceded forgiveness, where family was earned through actions, not assumed through blood. Patricia remained in federal prison. Her appeals exhausted her reign of terror, reduced to a cautionary tale. But her victims, all of us, were writing a different story. One where the destroyed daughter became a builder of foundations, where the silenced family found their voices, where the exile returned not for revenge, but for the chance to create something better from the ruins. Tomorrow would bring more work: foundation meetings, survivor support, the endless task of preventing other Patricias from destroying other families. But tonight, I'd sat at a table with people who'd chosen growth over guilt, truth over tales. It wasn't the family I'd lost. It was the family we were choosing to become. And for the first time since that horrible October night, when Patricia's lies shattered everything that felt like enough, the ghost of the girl they'd exiled was finally at peace. In her place sat a woman who'd learned that sometimes the greatest triumph isn't revenge, but the courage to let people earn redemption. The true reunion hadn't been about returning home, but about building a new one, brick by truthful brick. Thanksgiving arrived with unusual Southern California rain, washing the coast clean and turning the mountains emerald green. 6 months had passed since that first tentative dinner, and the family that gathered at Paradise Cove bore little resemblance to the one that had arrived in August, full of lies and comfortable delusions. I stood in the kitchen that had been Patricia's domain, now filled with the chaotic warmth of genuine preparation. Miriam commanded the stoves like a general directing Jennifer and Helen in preparations that filled the house with sense of home. Madison live-streamed the cooking process, her Healing for the Holidays series, having gained a devoted following of families navigating their own reconciliations. More butter, Miriam declared. Healing requires calories. The house had been transformed from a monument to revenge into the Foundation's first retreat center. Families torn apart by manipulation could stay here working with therapists while surrounded by the same beauty that had witnessed our own reckoning. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Patricia's crime scene had become a place of restoration. Through the kitchen windows, I watched Thomas and Richard setting tables on the covered terrace. They worked in companionable silence, two men who'd learned that toxic masculinity included enabling abuse through passive complicity. Their survivor support group for enabling fathers had grown to 3 chapters proof that our story wasn't unique. "You're thinking too hard," Emma observed, appearing at my elbow with coffee. She'd become family in every way that mattered, the sister who'd stood by me when blood relations failed. "I'm thinking about circles," I replied. "How we're back in this house at another family gathering, but everything's different." "Everything's honest," she corrected. "That makes all the difference." The early arrivals included cousins who'd earned their way back through consistent work. Young Lucy, now in college studying social work, hugged me with tears in her eyes. "I kept that birthday card," she whispered, "the one Patricia returned. It reminded me that you existed even when everyone pretended you didn't." By noon, 23 people had gathered. A careful selection of those who'd done the work and the new additions who'd never known the poisoned version of our family. Jennifer's daughters, away at college during the August revelation, had processed their mother's complicity and chosen connection over condemnation. Richard's son brought his boyfriend, testing whether this new family's acceptance ran deeper than words. "Before we eat," I announced, standing where Patricia had once held court, "I want to acknowledge someone who can't be here. My mother, Sophie Thompson, believed in the power of truth and the possibility of redemption. She saw through Patricia, too late to save herself, but trusted that truth would eventually surface. This foundation bearing her name has helped 47 families escape manipulation this year. Mom's legacy lives not in the lies told about her final wishes, but in the lives saved by honoring her real values." To Sophie, the room chorused glasses raising in genuine tribute rather than performed ceremony. The meal progressed with the controlled chaos of real family gatherings. Conversations overlapped, children demanded attention, and minor disasters were handled with laughter rather than Patricia's rigid perfectionism. When gravy spilled on the tablecloth, Jennifer just shrugged. Tables can be cleaned, moments can't be reclaimed. Speaking of moments, Madison announced, pulling out her phone with theatrical flair, "I have news. Remember that documentary producer who contacted me about our story? Netflix wants to do a limited series. Full creative control to us, focusing on family reconciliation rather than sensationalism. The table erupted in mixed reactions. Some were thrilled at the possibility of helping others through our story. Others worried about privacy, about reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. "What do you think, Deborah?" Thomas asked. "It's your story more than anyone's." "It's our story," I corrected, "and I think Mom would want us to share it if it helps even one family recognize the Patricia in their midst. But everyone has veto power. One no, and we decline." The discussion that followed exemplified how far we'd come. Concerns were raised respectfully, heard fully, and addressed honestly. No one bulldozed objections or manipulated emotions. In the end, we agreed to move forward carefully with therapeutic support and full control over the narrative. "Patricia's going to hate this," someone mentioned, then caught themselves. "Sorry, I know we don't." "It's okay to acknowledge her existence," I said firmly. "Pretending she never happened is just another form of denial. She's in prison facing justice for her crimes. What she thinks about our healing is irrelevant." As the afternoon progressed, smaller groups formed naturally. The younger generation gathered around Madison, brainstorming ways to use social media for family healing. The older adults discussed the foundation's expansion plans. Children played on the beach, where I'd once built sandcastles, unaware of the property's complex history. Thomas found me on the deck as sunset approached, painting the sky in shades of forgiveness. "I've been thinking about your mother," he said quietly, "about what she'd make of all this." "She'd be proud of Madison," I replied, thrilled about the foundation, grateful that Miriam finally shared her brisket recipe. "What about us?" he asked. "Would she forgive me for what I did to you?" I considered the question, watching waves that had witnessed both joy and betrayal. Mom believed in growth. She'd be more interested in who you've become than who you were. The father who chose Patricia is gone. The man who stands here took responsibility and changed. That's what she'd focus on. "I love you," he said simply. "I've loved you every day of the last decade, even when I was too poisoned by lies to show it. I know I can't undo the past, but I want you to know that." "I know," I said softly, "and I'm learning to love you again. Not as the father who betrayed me, but as the man who faced that betrayal and chose transformation. It's a different love built on truth rather than assumption. But it's real." We stood in comfortable silence, two people who'd found their way back to each other through pain and growth rather than despite it. As darkness fell, the family gathered in the living room where everything had exploded months earlier. But instead of confrontation, there was music. Richard had brought his guitar, revealing a talent hidden during his pompous phase. We sang badly, laughed freely, and created new memories to layer over the traumatic ones. "You know what I realized?" Jennifer said during a quiet moment. "We're not the same family Patricia tried to destroy. We're not even trying to recreate that family. We're something entirely new." "A chosen family," Helen added, "bound by accountability and growth rather than just genetics." "The family Sophie dreamed of," Miriam declared with satisfaction. "One that faces truth even when it hurts." As the evening wound down, I stood to make one final announcement. The foundation has been approached about creating a documentary series, not about our specific story, but about family manipulation and healing in general. I'll be executive producing, ensuring survivors' stories are told with dignity and purpose. Madison will be co-producing, bringing her generation's perspective. Anyone who wants to be involved is welcome. The response was enthusiastic. Even those hesitant about sharing our personal story were eager to help others recognize and escape manipulation. We were transforming from victims to advocates, from the broken to the builders. "One more thing," I added, my voice carrying new warmth. This house will host monthly family dinners for those continuing their growth work, not mandatory gatherings driven by obligation, but chosen connections celebrating progress. Paradise Cove is no longer about exclusion or exposure. It's about inclusion and evolution. As people prepared to leave, the goodbyes were genuine rather than performed. Hugs lasted longer, words carried weight, and plans for future gatherings felt real rather than obligatory. Madison cornered me before leaving. So I've been thinking about next Thanksgiving. Already, I want to invite other families from the foundation, the ones ready for it. Show them that healing is possible, that families can be rebuilt on truth. What do you think? I smiled at this remarkable young woman who'd refused to accept comfortable lies. I think Sophie Thompson would be proud. Yes, let's do it. After everyone left, Emma and I stood in the empty house that had witnessed so much. The cameras were gone, replaced by family photos that told true stories. The rigid perfection had given way to lived-in comfort. The mansion of revenge had become a home of healing. So Emma asked, was the revenge worth it? It wasn't revenge, I realized. It was revelation. I didn't destroy them, I revealed them. And in being revealed, they had the chance to choose who they wanted to become. Some chose growth, others chose stagnation, but everyone chose with full knowledge of the truth. My phone buzzed with a text from David, the man I'd been quietly dating for the past 3 months, a fellow entrepreneur who understood building something from nothing, who saw my scars as proof of strength rather than damage to be fixed. Dinner tomorrow, I want to hear about the family gathering, all of it, the good, the complicated, and the hopeful. I smiled, texting back confirmation. Another new beginning, another chance to build something real on foundations of truth rather than fantasy. As we locked up the house, I paused at the doorway, where I'd first revealed myself to my family. That moment had felt like an ending, of exile, of hiding, of letting them live in comfortable lies. But it had actually been a beginning, the start of something harder but healthier, more complex but more genuine. The family that had banished me no longer existed. In its place stood something rarer and more precious. People who'd faced their failures and chosen growth, who'd traded comfort for truth, who'd learned that real love requires accountability. Patricia had thought she was protecting herself when she destroyed me. Instead, she'd created the catalyst for her own exposure and our family's evolution. Her crimes had scattered us, but truth had drawn those willing to embrace it back together stronger for having been tested. I thought of viewers who might learn from our story, families who might recognize their own Patricias before the damage grew irreversible. Our pain could become their prevention, our healing their hope. The rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and full of possibility. As Emma drove us away from Paradise Cove, I didn't look back. The past had been confronted, processed, and integrated. The future stretched ahead, bright with purpose and rich with connection. The girl they'd exiled was gone. The woman who'd sought revenge had evolved. In her place stood someone who understood that the greatest triumph wasn't destroying those who'd hurt you, but building something beautiful from the wreckage. Not just surviving betrayal, but transforming it into fuel for helping others. Not just exposing lies, but creating spaces where truth could flourish. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Foundation work, documentary, planning the daily choice to maintain healthy boundaries while allowing earned intimacy. But tonight I was at peace. The family I'd lost had been replaced by something better. A family that chose each other, that valued growth over comfort, that understood love as a verb requiring constant action rather than a noun to be assumed. Sophie Thompson had raised a daughter who refused to be destroyed. That daughter had built an empire, exposed corruption, and created possibilities for redemption. But most importantly, she'd proven that even the deepest betrayals could become doorways to something better if you were brave enough to walk through them with truth as your guide. The beach house that banned me had become the home that welcomed healing. The family that exiled me had become advocates for justice. The pain that nearly broke me had become the strength that built a foundation. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's the courage to transform poison into medicine, exile into empire, and betrayal into the blueprint for something better. It's choosing to see revelation where others see only ruin and building bridges where others burned them. My story began with betrayal in a Pasadena dining room. It climaxed with revelation in a Malibu mansion, but it didn't end there. It evolved into something larger, a legacy of healing that would outlive us all. Because the most powerful response to being erased isn't just proving you exist. It's ensuring that others who face erasure have the tools, support, and hope to write themselves back into existence. It's transforming personal pain into collective power. It's choosing to build rather than just burn. The Thompson family reunion Patricia had tried to prevent had finally happened, not as a return to the past, but as a commitment to a future built on truth, not as a gathering of the entitled, but as an assembly of the accountable, not as a celebration of comfort, but as a choice to do better. And that, more than money, more than mansions, more than revenge, was the ultimate victory. We had become the family Sophie Thompson had always believed we could be. It just took losing everything to find our way there. If you've experienced family betrayal or manipulation, you're not alone. Have you ever had to rebuild relationships after discovering hard truths? What gave you the strength to choose growth over bitterness? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about resilience, redemption, and the power of truth. Remember to share this with anyone who might need to hear that healing is possible, even from the deepest wounds. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May you find the courage to face your truth, the strength to demand accountability, and the wisdom to build something better from whatever tried to break you. Until next time, remember, you are not what they did to you. You are what you choose to become.